So, welcome to any of you watching on YouTube. This is the most amazing session that I believe we're going to have. Listen very carefully. This is an amazing woman that I met some years ago through a mutual friend of ours, Linda Potgieter, who does programs where she helps people to dress for success and really learn to love their bodies, no matter what their shape, size, and colors. She's an amazing person. And I'm very grateful that I met Brandi through her. Brandi Del Rio is a mom with 3 children. She's got an amazing story to tell. And you know, when I met you, Brandi, I actually thought, oh, I hate these American women that look so perfect. They're like a Californian, just this gorgeous woman and this perfect mother. That's how I saw you. And when I say hate, I was like, she's just so gorgeous. I can't hate her. She's just like beautiful inside and out. And it's been so interesting because as time's gone by, we've connected a little bit more, and you've been on our 365 program, and we spent some time talking to each other. And it's just one day you just got hold of me and started telling me the story about your life. And I was completely blown away. This story tonight is for anybody with any kind of addiction. Any kind of addiction. It doesn't matter what kind of family you come from. You look at the family Brandi came from, amazing family, amazing parents, amazing situation, all the support you'd think that would be fine to keep you safe. And it helps so many parents, because so often, you know, you think of people with addictions are people that have been neglected, that nobody loves them, nobody cares about them. But addiction can sneak up and just take somebody in your family like that. So, man, share this video with everybody in the world. Let's get it over 1 million views. Let people watch this everywhere, because there's such hope from her story. So, Brandi, I'm gonna hand over to you, and I'd like you to start at the beginning as to what kind of family you came from. You can tell us that, and then how this started and where it went. And I'm going to let you talk. If you leave something out that I know of, I might interrupt, but I'd really like you to just talk. I really would. So you go ahead. Go
okay, give me 5 seconds. I'm going to make sure that I have my do not disturb on. I just realized that. So yes. Okay. I am so, wow. Okay. Whew.
Right now, you're just talking to me, so don't be nervous.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just making sure my phone is also off. Okay. Do not disturb. There we go. You're talking to me, but
right.
Many people are going to watch it and benefit from you. So just be honest and talk to me. That's who you're talking to. Don't be nervous at all.
I'm going to act as if it's that first time that we were talking.
Yep. Go for it. I need to hear your story.
All right.
And I, by the way, just come from a family with a lot of addicts. Both my parents were addicts, pretty much, of alcohol and cigarettes. Both my husband Mark's parents were alcoholics. And I know many people in the extended family as well who have addiction problems. It's enormous. It's enormous. So Brandi, please go for it. Tell your story from the bottom of your heart.
Oh gosh. Well, I'm grateful that I have tissue here with me, because I can already feel my heart racing. Marianne, thank you. First of all, thank you for taking the time to speak with me, because I have been looking up to you and admiring you for the last 4 or 5 years now, since Linda introduced us. In fact, I have your book right here, The Healthy Kids, yes, with her personal handwritten note in August of 2017. So yes, 5 years ago. And you are correct. Addiction is rampant, and it's something that I'm very passionate about. And it's something that I have chose to no longer hide on, because I do believe that it's in every single person's home, in every single family, whether somebody grew up in the church, whether somebody grew up super healthy. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you grew up. It doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter who your parents were. I firmly believe that addiction has hit every single home in the whole entire world. And so I truly am here because I believe that God walked me through what I went through for this moment right now. I believe that I raised my hand before I came down here and volunteered to go through the hell that I went through, because he knew that I would be a mouthpiece for the world. it hurts my heart to see other people hurting. And then especially now being on the other side of it, right? I struggled for 18 years. And then even after going through 2 different rehab programs, I continued to struggle. And now being on the other side of that and being able to see what is possible for people and seeing that our world is actually just getting even more and more dark, it like really fires me up. So yes, I have 3 babies that are 3 and under. I also married into 5 children as well. So there's 8 total. They're teenagers and adults right now, so they're not in our home as often. Yet having 3 babies, 3 and under is a very full life. However, because of this fire and conviction in my spirit, I'm choosing to step out. So one of the reasons is because what you see now is, hair and makeup and earrings and nice clothes. I was super blessed to be born into a family that taught me how to look and say and be and how would I say that? Like say all the right things, more or less. I was
And
super
look like
blessed
the
to have,
perfect person.
pardon me, and look perfect. Yeah. And look like the perfect person.
Yeah.
And I just want to, make sure that I grew up with an amazing, incredible family. I truly, truly, truly did. And that's why I get so fired up is because my mom, I grew up in a hair salon and I was literally sitting next to her salon as a little girl at 6 months old. And she took me to work every single week. She wanted a little girl more than anything her whole entire life. I have 2 older brothers that are 6 and 9 years older than me. And I was actually a mistake, so to speak. And she tells me that story. And that was even something that affected me growing up, the power of our words. However, yes, I grew up in a hair salon, and from a very young age, I was super blessed to have a mom who taught me what sitting a woman down in her chair could do for that woman walking out, like seeing women walk in, kind of like feeling like, and then my mom would sit down and have 30 minutes with them and they would walk out just all like perked up and alive. And so she taught me how to have nice makeup and nice clothes. And I'm so blessed that she shared with me that you don't have to show a lot of skin to be sexy, right? My mom taught me how to dress for my body type and to dress conservatively, so to speak, but that conservative can still look really sexy. And I share that because I felt like looking back, I feel like I was almost like this little like walking robot, right? Like I knew how. She took me to Nordstrom at 11 years old and she taught me about skincare, and she had me work with a professional on how to do my makeup because she knew that I was into makeup. And so she's like sat me down and had somebody actually teach me how to do it so that I didn't have, crazy makeup everywhere. And then my father was a coach. And at the time, as a little girl, being brought up with 2 older brothers who played hockey, and my father coached them in hockey. And my father was also in basketball and in many, many sports. And he has a brilliant, brilliant mind. And he can see things like 2 and 3 steps ahead of the game. And he can see things on a level that like most people can't see that at, which I now at 40 years old, see that as an amazing opportunity of like excellence and leadership. Yet at the time, as a little girl, 2 and 3 and 4 years old, who wanted to play with dolls and just have fun, I was told that there's no mommy, there's no daddy. You have throw your shoulders back, eye contact, firm handshake, smile, nod when people are talking to you. You're at the hockey rink, you're in a hair salon, you're around a lot of adults. Nobody wants to be around an annoying little sister. And I was like, okay, I admired my brothers and my dad so much my whole life. They were superstars to me, like literally superstars. I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska. It was a small town. And so every weekend when my brothers would have big hockey games, they would be in the paper. And everybody knew me as Jack and Tom Kowal's little sister. Oh, that's Jack and Tom Kowal's little sister. And by the time I was 11, 12 years old, my brothers both ended up playing for the local college. And they would sell out the arena. 6,500 people would show up, and their numbers were 21 and 22. You know, it was like, it was, man, it was amazing. It was such a rush. It was so exhilarating to be an 11-year-old, 12-year-old girl watching my brothers in front of 6,500 people. And I too did my best to get involved in sports. I played soccer when I was younger. I played basketball. I was blessed with genes where I was probably 5'9" by the time I was 12 years old, and I was developed, and my body looked like I was probably 18 or 19 by the time I was 12. And so when you combine all of those things as a 12-year-old, I would walk into places, you know, I was taught, walk in like you own the place. And so I would walk into establishments, and even in school. I remember in third grade, my teacher told my mom that I should be a lawyer. She's like, I have never been challenged by a student as much as I've been challenged by Brandi. She's like, and she actually, a handful of times when she comes to me about something with her schoolwork, is correct. So by the time I was 12, I felt like I needed to be 18, 19, 20. And I can remember every time I would show my dad some kind of progress or something that I did, he would show me how to do it just a little bit better, which now I honestly see that as a gift. But at 10, 11, 12 years old, it was like nothing I can do measures up. Like if I'm not perfect, my dad won't love me. And anytime that I would go to show him something or do something, he always had a better way. And it weighed on me. It honestly weighed on me. I can remember him telling me, like, you know, you got to get this under control. We need to get this under control. Got to get it under control. So I started feeling like I needed to have control over everything. I started feeling like I needed to be perfect. And then I would hear statements like, oh, if you could just be a little bit more like this person. Or, hey, you know, on your basketball team, when you watch so-and-so, you see how she does it. You see how she does this. You see how she does that. And you know what? When you're playing on your team, like nobody wants to be around a sore loser, or not a sore loser, but nobody wants to be around somebody who doesn't know how to win. And in order to win, you got to be the best. And in order to be the best, we need to practice every day. And so you're going to do 50 layups on your left and 50 layups on your right. And you're going to do 500 free throws. And I'm getting choked up right now because I know that at the time my dad was doing the best that he knew how. Right. And so that like chokes me up right now, because he's an amazing, incredible man who was doing the best that he knew how to bond with his little girl. However, at the time, it had me feeling exhausted and like nothing I could ever do was good enough. And so I started hanging around with older people, right? Knew how to put my hair and makeup on, say all the right things. I was developed, and people thought at 12 years old that I was 16, 17, 18. So the crowd of people I started hanging around with were older, and they were smoking pot. And so I started smoking pot. And I can remember one day my mom found some marijuana in my jacket. I was 12 years old. I was in 7th grade. And she found some marijuana in my jacket pocket. And she's like, what is this? And I'm like, oh, it's a friend. And I lied to her, and she believed me. So I was like, huh. And now looking back, I can see that like subconsciously deposited that, like, oh, okay. And then I kept testing the waters. And my friends and I were doing things, you know, that were more advanced in my life. And I remember the first time I drank, I was 13 years old, and I blacked out and I puked everywhere. And I can remember my father was a little bit more liberal than my mom, and my mom was really concerned about me. And he's like, oh, you know, it's just teenagers. It's just everyday stuff. Like, don't worry about it, Brandi, or don't worry about it, Sherry. Like, Brandi will be okay. Like, look at her. She has it all together. Look how pretty she is. She can talk to anybody, she's so confident. And like, he even saw it, on the outside. And to this day, it's something that he still struggles with if I go through a rough time. He's like, I don't understand. Like, how can't you just look in the mirror and see how beautiful you are? And that, you could do anything. And that was the other thing, Marianne, is like, I remember when I was younger, I was told, like, you can do anything, Brandi. Like, you're so outspoken and you're so like beautiful and bold that you're going to change the world. Man, it was so hard. Because I heard that so much when I was younger. We went to church every Sunday and I was involved with my youth group. And I would speak in front of women, when I was 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. I remember my mom telling me at 2 years old, I would like push her and my brothers out of the way and like walk up to the front of the church and go to the pulpit. They had something where you bear your testimony the first Sunday of every month. My mom said I would just storm up there and tell people, if you would just love one another more, if you would just be kinder to another, our world would be a better place at 2. So it was like, this was always in me. And then they would tell me how great I was going to be, yet nothing I could ever do seemed to be good enough. In school came really easy to me in elementary school. And because like I said, my mom taught me about seeing the good in everybody. She would share with me about compassion and love and the fact that not everybody gets touched every day. So being able to give somebody a hug, being able to put your hand on their shoulder. She had what she called her LOLs, right? It's not laugh out loud. It's her little old ladies. She had her little old ladies that came in and did their roller sets every week. And she would say, when you go talk to them, put your hand on their shoulder. Because just because you get hugged every day, Brandi, just because you get told I love you every day, there's a lot of people out there that don't. And so the things that I was pursuing, basketball, soccer, all these sports, I would pursue music clubs. And when I wasn't the best, I felt like nobody wants to be around me. So I started getting all of these lies happening in my head, these tormenting thoughts of you're not good enough. Nothing you ever do will be good enough. And I found that when I drank or when I smoked pot, those lies would go away. And so it wasn't like I drank and smoked pot to have fun. Like, I did it to quiet the voices. However, I still knew how to smile, throw my shoulders back, have eye contact, say all the right things, wear clothes that look nice, and wear my makeup really well. And by the time I was 16 years old, I ended up getting my first DUI, driving under the influence in America, DUI. And even then, like, lied my way out of it. And white lies, little tiny white lies, began building upon each other, building and building and building. And there were lies after lie, after lie, after lie, after lie. And I started to think, like, well, when I go to college, when I am in a sorority, when I make it big, right? Because I was always told that I was going to do big things in life. However, I kept falling flat on my face. By the time I hit junior high, school didn't come so easily to me anymore. And C's were not allowed. We were not allowed to have any C's in the Kowal house. So I would bust my butt and I would study and I would photocopy the hard books that they would give us, and I would highlight, because it came hard to me. And I remember like really like doing the best I could with my homework. And when report cards came out, I had 2 C's and I still got grounded. I got in major trouble, got all my privileges taken away. And so it was like, once again, nothing I can do is good enough. I'll never be able to be perfect. And why now it became, why even try? Why even try? So when I was 15 years old, I was at a house party with people who were seniors. I was a sophomore in high school, and a man walked through the door, and my girlfriend introduced me to him. And she's like, yeah, don't you know who she is? That's Brandi Kowal. And he's like, and he went to a different high school than me on another side of town. And she was like, that's Jack and Tom Kowal's little sister. And he was like, who's that? And I was like, oh, you know who Jack and Tom Kowal are? Oh my gosh. And like that started my and we started dating and we started having sex. And his mom at the time was an alcoholic, and she allowed us to sleep at his house. And I literally would like wake up and have breakfast with his family at 15 years old. I would be laying next to him, and she would open the door and say, good morning. Can I make you guys breakfast? Hi, Brandi. Good to have you here. Like, I look back at that and I'm like, oh my gosh. And even then, that was before cell phones and before caller ID. So I'd call my house and tell my mom I'm at a girlfriend's house. And at one point, his dad even picked up the phone and was like, hey, where's my son? And I don't want to say his name, but he's like, hey, where's my boy? My mom's like, oh, who's that? And I'm like, oh, Stephanie has a stepbrother. She's like, really? I want to talk to her mom. And I even manipulated her mother to lie to my mom. The lies were just so insane, Marianne. Yet it was like, I knew it wasn't me, but I didn't know how to get out of it. I genuinely did not know how to get out of it. I had started even convincing myself that this was my life. And I didn't end up going to college. I barely graduated high school. By the time my junior and senior year rolled around, school was so hard for me. And I had the experience of seeing that even if I busted my butt, I still couldn't make it and was still going to get in trouble. I remember every year I would fall asleep in third period. And I always wondered, why am I tired? It didn't matter what class it was. It didn't matter that I had a really awesome teacher. Every single year, I fell asleep between 9:30 and 10 a.m. in that class. And my mom wanted to take me to the doctors. My mom wanted to take me to counseling. And my dad's like, no, counseling's for the birds. No, she doesn't need any of that stuff. She's just going through typical teenager things. And then if I would get in trouble in school, he would come down on me super hard and take away privileges and take away things. And within a couple of weeks, it would kind of blow over, right? Because it would blow over, and I would end up, putting on a smile and saying all the right things and having life go back to what it was. However, the drinking had gotten really out of control. The drinking, the skipping school, the smoking marijuana. I mean, I skipped school all the time. Every single day I skipped school. And I can remember my mom finding a whole bunch of notes in my pockets saying, please excuse Brandi from school. I would write it in pencil and chicken scratch. And then I would sign it in pen, all fancy with her name, right? She calls me, Brandi, come home right now. I'm like, what? She's like, throws all these notes out. She's like, what is this? This is forgery. You can't do this. And I was like, Mom, what are you talking about? I wouldn't forge. I tried, but I was too afraid to turn them in because I knew that they would know it wasn't me. You know that the school keeps the notes if I turn them in. She's like, oh. I'm like, Mom, I would never do that. And she believed me. And so once again, and she did. My mom is one of those women that she sees the good in everybody. My mother knows no stranger. She does not have a bad thing to say about anybody. Honestly, her heart is so huge. However, now looking back and with the work that we've done, she can see where there was like codependency, enabling, right? The first time my rehab center counselor told my mom that my mom enabled me, my mom was like, how dare you? I'm just being Christ-like, right? And it really crushed her because that was her heart behind it. Yet when I was 16, 17 years old, I already had a DUI under my belt. My grades were bad. I would barely roll out of bed for school. My mother would start my car in the dead of winter in Alaska, so it would defrost for me. She would wake me up with my orange juice by my bed and like my little egg and English muffin breakfast and be like, okay, your car's ready. And I would like barely roll out of bed to having all of this. And then if it wasn't there, I'm like, Mom, why didn't you make me breakfast? It was ridiculous. Looking back, I'm like, my gosh, my mother was a saint, like an absolute saint, and how she put up with me, I have no idea. What the drinking did, I was a cheerleader, right? My junior and senior year of high school, it was like, when I get on the cheerleading squad, I made the cheerleading squad because on the outside, Marianne, I really did well at like keeping everything looking perfect. So I was a hockey cheerleader, a cheerleader for the hockey team. Yet we put vodka in our smoothies for like every single cheerleading game. We would get the Slurpees from 7-Eleven and put vodka in our Slurpees and drink. I honestly could go on and on and on about the lying and the drinking and the living the double life. And I had said a lot of, I will never, right? I will never do cocaine. I will never have sex with somebody who I don't know. I will never have sex with more than one person in 1 week. I know that that's like really raw and real, but that's the truth of it. Like that's what it came down to. And slowly but surely those.
This stuff is really important. Nobody talks about it. Everybody brushes it under the carpet, especially when you're coming from a godly family. Everybody pretends, and you live that pretense. And this is very, very important. So don't, just go for it. Whatever you really.
So growing up in a hair salon, I learned work ethic from a really young age. I can remember being 6 years old and answering the phones and sweeping hair. And every Saturday I would go to work with my mom, and all the women would pay me $5 to fold the towels and answer the phone and sweep hair. And so I made my $45 every weekend. And my mom's sister, my aunt, she cut my umbilical cord. I grew up with her and she was my best friend. She ended up moving away when I was 9 years old. And it was devastating. Even just thinking about it immediately brings me to tears. It was devastating. She was like, man, she was everything to me at the time. She really was. She was my best friend. She moved away. And so each summer I would work all year to be able to go visit my aunt for 6 weeks at a time. She moved to North Carolina and I was 9 years old and was put on an airplane to travel across the country from Anchorage, Alaska to Charlotte, North Carolina. And I would go spend 6 weeks there. And so my weekends as a little girl turned into going to work with my mom every single weekend because that was my goal. I just wanted to make money to be able to go have money to see my aunt. And so that turned into always having a job. I remember I was like 11 years old and I went and rollerbladed up to the local burger joint and I got a job up there at 11. And I mowed lawns for my neighbors and would earn $20 mowing lawns. And I found myself working more than I was being a kid. I found myself wanting to have a job and earn money more than I wanted to like play with my girlfriends and have sleepovers and slumber parties, which meant then I also had money for my friends and I to buy drugs and alcohol because my friends, they weren't working. They didn't grow up in that atmosphere. They weren't being able to get jobs at 10, 11, 12 years old that were making them $50 to $100 on a weekend. And by the time I was 16, I ended up being a waitress or a hostess at a Mexican restaurant. And I remember seeing all of these men have mistresses. And I was like, what? Are you kidding me? And I would tell them, I'm like, you guys are the scum of the earth. You guys are the lowest. You guys remind me of tar on the bottom of the barrel. I cannot believe that you have a wife and children and you're cheating on your children, or you're cheating on your wife and acting as if nothing. I would watch their wives come in with their kids and they would serve them food and all their kids and everything. And then they would leave. And then like an hour later, their girlfriend would come in. Well, Spanish was my elective in high school. And I had Spanish in first period at 7:30 in the morning, which meant I was almost always late or never showed up. And when I did, I fell asleep quite a bit. So I asked my boss, I'm like, hey, would you be willing to help me with my Spanish homework? He's like, sure. 37-year-old man, married with kids, 2 kids. I knew his wife and kids really well. And this is the first time I'm sharing this publicly, but it has to do with lies. Once again, like lying and how quickly things can just sneak up on you right out from underneath you that you have no idea if you aren't like aware. And I don't even know how I would have prepared differently. But I was so excited that he would help me with my homework, and I would go to work and we would stay late afterwards. And he started to offer me margaritas and strawberry daiquiris. And I'm like, yeah, hello. Like I said, by the time I was 16 years old, I had already had a DUI. And I started drinking, how cool. Ooh, yeah, I'm doing my Spanish homework and drinking. Well, next thing you knew, that turned into a full-blown affair. And my shifts at the Mexican restaurant turned into drinks at a hotel where I would lie and tell my parents I'm going to work. And I literally lived 5 minutes from where I worked. And my best friend worked the job with me, and she knew what was going on. And if my parents called to ask me to bring them home some food, she would say, oh, Brandy's with a customer right now. I'll have her call you back. And she would page me. I had a little pager, right? One of those little pagers, and she'd page me 911. And my whole senior year turned into having an affair with a 37-year-old married man who had 2 kids. And it was crazy. He would go get his haircut by my mom. He would go get his haircut by my mom and look her in the eye and tell her what an amazing daughter she had. And that I was incredible and I was one of his best employees. And she had no idea. And this went on for probably 6 or 7 months until it got drastically out of control. And the drinking got out of control, and the lie after lie after lie got out of control. And I would party with my friends, and I blacked out every time I drank. I literally blacked out every single time I drank. And my friends would tell me the next day, your boss was calling you. Oh, he bought me a cell phone. So I'm 17 years old. My boss got me a cell phone. I can't even remember what lie I told my parents to be able to have that one. I think cell phones, this was 1998, 1999. They're starting to come around when they were a huge block, right? And I had a job, right? So I was paying all my own bills. He would pay for everything and give me hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Put a sound system in my car for me, would buy me clothes, and he had me waitressing. So you couldn't serve alcohol as a under 21 in Anchorage. So I would take tables and serve tables, and then he would serve all the alcohol, and he'd let me keep the tips. So I was making like 150, 200 bucks a night as a 17-year-old. And a 17-year-old with an alcohol problem and an identity that was based on lies was not a healthy habit at all. And finally, it all came to a head. My friends would say, like, man, your boss is calling you. And at one point, his wife even walked in on us fully dressed, but we were in a private area across from the restaurant. And she slapped me across the face, and he had jumped out the window. And I'm like, I'm looking back now at 17 years old. I have a 21-year-old daughter that I couldn't even imagine if she was going through that now. And like my cousins, I remember growing up and seeing my cousins at 15, 16, 17 years old going, what? And at the time, because I was groomed to be so much older than I was like, this is all my fault. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have worn pants that just fit my body, to be honest with you. Because like I said, my mom taught me, like, you don't have to show skin to be beautiful, Brandi. And so I did. I dressed very conservatively for what, especially you see nowadays. However, at the time, I considered it all my fault because I knew he was married. I knew he had children. And that condemnation, that hurt, that pain turned into like hating myself. I hated myself. And the drinking became even more out of control. Yet I knew how to put my hair and makeup on. I knew how to dress nice. And so I just stayed the course. And I came across a network marketing company when I was 18 years old. And they told me that you don't have to go to college to be successful. And so I finally thought I made it. I'm like, yes, this is amazing. This is an awesome environment. These people are like fun and energetic. I fit right in here. And they saw how outgoing I was, how beautiful I was on the outside. And they used me as a testimony for their company to be the youngest executive in the company. At that time, if you could do $100,000 in 1 month, you would become what was called an executive, which was the second to highest level in the company. So, excuse me. So I joined the company in September. And by the time October rolled around, we got so many of my friends and family, which, remember, we grew up in a small town. My family was plastered all over the newspaper for sports all the time. Both of my parents went to high school in that town. We knew a lot of people, and a lot of people loved us. And especially a lot of people loved, Jack and Tom Kowal's little sister, the outgoing, Brandi, is always smiling. So by the time I was 18 and we had this amazing group of people come into town, we would hold conferences and get dozens of people, close to 50 to 100 people, and it was a $5,000 offer. We got people to purchase $5,000 worth of product to support the business and start their own business as well. Well, come middle of October, we had about $60,000 in revenue. So now they wanted to create a story out of me of being the youngest executive. So they're like, can you just call this person and see if they'll do 5,000 more? By the time October 31st rolled around, we had people who had put $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 in to help me meet the goal, make the story. And then we would sell all their product for them. You just put the money in up front, and then Brandi's going to get like a $25,000 check, and we'll pay you back. And then we'll take on that product and we'll sell it for you. So we did. We hit the goal. I became the youngest executive in the company. I was 18 years old. I remember going to Nordstrom and I bought a suit, and we flew to Las Vegas, and we were having a conference, and they were going to award me as the youngest executive in the company. And the woman that was working with me, who was, my higher level woman that had been with the company for a handful of years, she looked at me and she goes, okay, when you go up there, you're going to say, oh my gosh, like, this is so crazy. I just got a $25,000 check for just like getting excited and putting seats in the butt. Like, oh my goodness, this is the best thing ever. Yay. Like, she like role played it out for me, like the kick and all, like, and I looked at her and I'm like, but that's not true. She's like, it doesn't matter, Brandi. That's what's going to sell. Okay. Like, I know that you are so much smarter and like way beyond your years, and you're an old soul. But for this, we need you to just go up there as like this like young, kind of like ditzy 18-year-old. It'll fire up so many people, and it'll be amazing for business. And so I did that. I went up there, lied my face off, and she was right. I got my $25,000 check and I turned around and paid out like $24,500 because I remember I went and got myself a Gucci watch when I was in Las Vegas. I went and bought a $395 silver bracelet Gucci watch. And that was my big reward. And so lies. And I stayed with that company. And then that company actually ended up going under because the owner lied. 9 months later, the company folded because the owner had been embezzling money and whatever. And so I turned deeper into my drinking. And I would turn to my left and my right and like not even know what to do with myself, because now what was I going to do? Like, I wasn't going to go to college. I actually, no, I went home to Anchorage, Alaska, because I had moved to build the business somewhere else. Cause that was, once you are done with your warm market, then you want to move and create a new market somewhere else. And so I did just that. And I got there and I no longer was the story. So now they were looking for a new story in a new town, which meant all of a sudden they wanted me to be the captain of the football team. And I'm like, wait a second, I'm a cheerleader. I don't know how to run plays. And next, they wanted me to run this $100,000 organization. And I'm like, I don't know how to do business. All of a sudden I was supposed to show up and make calls and follow up and all the things. And I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing here. So I ended up gaining 30 pounds, maybe even 30 to 40 pounds in about 4 or 5 months. Because I ate and I slept. I ate and I slept. The women that I was with didn't drink. So I wasn't drinking at this time, but my drinking addiction turned into a food addiction. And I ate and I slept and I ate and I slept and I ate and I slept. And then the company went under. So I went back to Alaska, signed up for college. I was going to go to college, live underneath my parents' roof, save some money. And college was not for me. So I decided I'm going to move. I'm going to move out of town, right? I remember going to that man that I had the affair with. And even though everything went to hell in a handbasket and all was exposed and I had moved away for a while, he had money and I had no money and I wanted to move. And so in order for him to give me any money, he would he would say, I'll give you money if you do this sexual favor for me in the liquor closet. So I'm 19 years old doing freaking sexual favors in a liquor closet to get a couple $100. Talk about like killing the soul. So I moved to Denver, Colorado. I went and lived with my aunt, right? Told you my aunt was my best friend. She's like, come move here. Moved to Denver, Colorado, hoping that things would be different. And things were different for a while. I went to Nordstrom and applied for MAC Cosmetics, right? My mom had taught me how to do my makeup, and I went to MAC at like 15 years old and learned, and they drew out this picture. And so by the time I was 19, I had my makeup skills down fairly well. And so I interviewed with them, and within 3 days, I had the job. And what was crazy is at the time I didn't know this, but I had beat out 46 applicants. 46 applicants. I met people later on down the road, and they had told me that they had been applying for MAC for 2 and 3 years and couldn't get on with them. But I knew, I was very personable, and then I didn't know any better. So I just was me. I was just sort of outgoing and friendly and loving, because underneath it all, Marianne, like honestly, underneath it all, like that is who I am. I told you that 2-year-old little girl went up in front of her church and said, if you just love more and are kinder and are more gentle and compassionate with each other, our world would be a better place. I probably didn't say compassionate at 2 years old. However, I did say if we were just more kind. So underneath all of this, that is who I am. I love to love people. And that's what I did best. And for the next year, I worked at MAC Cosmetics, and I loved on every woman that sat in my chair. And it was the most fun and amazing experience I ever had. And I remember thinking, like, this is awesome. It took me 20 minutes to drive to get to work. And I like made this goal that I wouldn't turn the radio on until I said my prayers. And so like my prayer time with the Lord was driving to work. Because I grew up going to church every single Sunday. However, when you go to church every single Sunday and you have all these people speaking all these amazing, great things over you, and then 6 days a week, you are in a household where your father tells you in order to live at home, you have to go to church, but he never went to church with us. And then I was smoking pot and drinking and having sex and lying about all of it. I was so confused that I didn't know my left from my right, but I knew that I felt peace when I was at church. I knew that every time we would sing, tears would stream down my face because the Spirit was in me. And I knew that there was something better out there. But 6 of the other days a week, church was 3 hours, like all the other hours of the week, there was nothing else like that. So the ways of the world, like, totally had a much stronger hold of me. And then growing up in a hockey rink, the hockey rink atmosphere wasn't, a very spiritual, churchy atmosphere either. And especially in competitive sports. So I did my best to put my best foot forward, and I would like see if I could do all the things, right? I made sure I prayed and I said my prayers, and I would go to church on Sunday. And I did. I had a blast working for Mac. And I actually got promoted within 3 months of working for them for the assistant manager. So at the time, we were the #1 cosmetic company in the whole region. We were the #1 in sales. We were doing $1 million in sales a year at that counter with $15 lipsticks. Like, we were rocking it, and they chose me as the assistant manager. So I'm 19, 20 years old, making, like almost $2,000 every 2 weeks. I was making crazy, incredible money. And I had a fake ID. I had had a fake ID since I was 15 years old. And this is back in the 90s. So I even walked my butt into the DMV, Division of Motor Vehicles, with a girlfriend of mine's birth certificate and social security card, because not everything was digital back then. And they didn't keep pictures on file. And I walked in like I owned the place, gave the birth certificate, social security card, and said, I'm XYZ's name, and this is my birthday, snapped a photo, and I actually had a real fake ID. So I was buying alcohol and going to the clubs, the nightclubs at 16, 17, 18, 19, and now I live in Denver, Colorado, 20 years old. The partying was off the chain. It was so intense, crazy. My coworkers would always say, like, oh my gosh, girl, like, you smell like a brewery. And a lot of times I would have to take little vodka shooters just to get up in the morning to keep my blood alcohol stable to show up for work. But I was able to cover up with perfumes and mouthwash and eating things. And my personality was always so goofy anyways that nobody ever really knew, which once again was a lie. And it was like eating at my spirit. At 22 years old, I was exposed to cocaine, and it freaked me out. Yet the person who introduced it to me was a really good friend of mine. And I was like, all right, okay, I'll try a little. And so I did. And that night I didn't black out. So I'm like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Well, then about 6 months later, because he knew this gentleman that had introduced it to me, he knew my personality. So he's like, you're only allowed to do it with me, and we're not going to do it all the time. I'm like, okay, cool. he's probably one of the only men I never slept with, to be honest with you. That's so crazy. I slept with all his roommates, but he's one of the only ones. I had a job where I was working as a cocktail waitress, and the woman working with me, and once again, like they were like, "Oh, we'll hire you as a hostess, but you need more experience. You don't have any experience being a cocktail waitress." And I was like, I've worked at California Pizza Kitchen as a waitress. I've worked at a Mexican restaurant as a waitress. Like, I'm not going to go from waitress to hostess. It's okay. Thanks, but no thanks. Well, I interviewed so well because I put a black cocktail dress on. The gentleman that told me about the job, he's like, go buy yourself a really nice cocktail dress, go in there, act like you own the place, and interview. Well, a couple of weeks later, they called me and said, hey, we have a woman going on pregnancy leave. We'd love to give you a shot in our cigar lounge. It was a 5-star steakhouse that had a cigar lounge. So I'm like, cool. I didn't know any different. So now all of a sudden I'm selling $500 bottles of wine and like $200 and $300 cigars. And the people that I'm working with are anywhere from 8 to 15 to 20, 30 years older than me, because it was such a high-end place. And one night I had had too many drinks, because all the bartenders, when you go into the cigar lounge, everybody knew that was their night to drink as a bartender, because the managers didn't come in the cigar lounge a whole lot. So they were drinking one night a week. I was drinking 5. And I got too drunk one night, and a bartender she said, go upstairs and do this. She gave me a $1 bill, folded up, and gave me a straw. So I'm like super drunk. I go run upstairs to the bathroom. Man, I can remember that so clearly. And I came downstairs and I was like, oh my gosh, I tried to do it all, but I couldn't. And she was like, what? She's like, Brandi, that was like whatever the amount was, but it was $100 worth. It was like a whole gram of cocaine. I don't know. I can't remember exactly, but she freaked out because it could have killed me. And I can remember that night I was bouncing off the walls. But like I said, because my personality was upbeat and outgoing anyway, nobody really knew. And I had control. I was in control of the situation. I was able to remember all the things and we made probably $800 that night in our pocket. And it was the most incredible experience. And that started my journey with cocaine, because cocaine now became my Red Bull. It became my caffeine. It wasn't like to get high. It allowed me to drink as much alcohol as I wanted to drink without blacking out, and with remembering who I woke up to the next morning. And that was crazy. That was so crazy. And as I progressed, I was only 22. And so the people that I was partying with, my boyfriends, were normally anywhere from 10 to 15 years older than me. Because now looking back, I can see that I was seeking love from my father. I was seeking love from my brothers. And so it was always from older men. So with that came a little bit more time under their belt with the amount of drugs and alcohol they were partying with. And from the time I was 22 to 29, pretty much all of my I nevers came true. Except for one. That came when I was 30. I remember I was 28 years old, and I went to a counselor, and I spilled all the beans. I told them everything that was going on with my life. And they said, Brandi, you have never been taught how to even brush your teeth and have a shower and make your bed. Like, you're 28 years old with the mentality of like 6, 7, 8-year-old. Emotionally, not mentally, emotionally. They're like, you would do so well going to a rehab program where they actually like teach you how to be responsible. where they teach you how to wake up at a certain time, not just roll out of bed and get into your warmed car with your orange juice and English muffin handed to you out the door. No, where you learn how to set an alarm and like take care of yourself. I didn't know how to take care of myself. I had always lived with people. Even when I got an apartment with my best friend, I never stayed there. I always stayed with whoever I was dating at the time. It was like I would meet a guy at a bar, we would sleep together that night, and I would move in. No joke. And it might not have been officially moved in, but I pretty much slept there every single night. The only time I might not sleep there was because I was so hungover that I didn't want him to see me that way, because I would dry heave and puke for hours and my body would have the shakes. And I didn't know how to get out of it. I ended up hating marijuana because of some personal family experiences. And I was like, I hate that drug. And when I was 25, I met a gentleman who told me he hated cocaine. He was 10 years older than me. And he's like, I hate that stuff. I had my experience with that and it's horrible. We went out drinking. I went home with him and he flushed my cocaine down the toilet. And I was like, oh my gosh, he's going to help me. He's going to help me. So we started dating and he smoked pot. And I'm like, well, all right, whatever. I don't like it. I don't like what it does to me. I don't feel in control, but you do your thing. Next thing you know, he was starting to sell it. He's like, hey, I have somebody that will give me a supply of weed. You cool if I sell it? And I'm like, whatever. Like, you're a grown man. You can do whatever you want. So next thing you know, he starts selling it. And by now, my raging alcoholism of blacking out every night and buying cocaine behind his back and him flushing it down the toilet probably at least a dozen times turned into, well, if you can't beat her, you might as well join her. So he now jumped in to partying with me, which, you know, he was 10 years older than me and had his own rodeo beforehand. So that turned into, oh, I'm just going to get like $50 so I can not black out. So like, no, we're buying like $200 worth in one night. And it radically steamrolled out of control quickly. I was living with him. We were living in a little apartment, and the gentleman that was supplying him with marijuana said, hey, I got an opportunity for you. You and your girlfriend, because he too, super good looking guy, had the smile. Like, I never would have thought that he was a drug addict. Had an amazing smile, clear skin, great eye contact, all the things, right? And the gentleman told him, you and your girlfriend look like the perfect couple. Nobody will believe that you guys would ever grow weed. So how about I find you a house that's like 4,000 square feet. You guys grow marijuana. I'll come and set up everything. I'll pay for everything. I'll do all of it. You just be the face. It's your name. It's your everything. And we'll split the profit 50-50. I'll pay for your rent. I'll do all of it. I've been doing this for years. I know how to set it up so where it doesn't smell, all the things. So we're like, heck yeah. So now we move into this house and I'm growing marijuana, Marianne. I'm 26, 27 years old, growing marijuana, like 50 plants, and inviting my mom and my nieces over to my house, right? Where they're like, why are you in this humongous home? And I'm like, oh, well, we're house sitting. Oh, well, we're this. Like I had a lie for everything. And my boyfriend at the time was really great at lying as well. And we both knew how to dress the part and act the part. We had everybody steamrolled, at least we thought. My parents were all that really mattered for me at the time, but my brothers, like people around the town, were starting to talk, and people would tell my parents things, and I would lie. I had a lie to cover it up, to cover all of it up. And by now my oldest brother had a baby. He had 2 daughters, and my little nieces were my everything. I would take them on walks. We would go bike riding. Oh my gosh, they were the light of my life. And they looked to me like I was a superstar. And by the time they were 2, about 1.5, 2, and 4.5, 5, I couldn't do it anymore. I said I would never drink with my nieces, ever. And my boyfriend and I took them to dinner one night. We had gone to a movie, and then we went to the Outback. I remember sitting at a high top table in the bar, and he and I were taking shots while I was watching my nieces. And I was like, what has happened to me? And I remember thinking, I have lied to everybody in my family. I have lied to all of my previous generations. And I was looking at this new generation coming up. And I'm like, I cannot lie to this next generation. I can't keep it up. I will not do this. So at 28, I went to that counselor, and he told me that what would be best for me was to go to an inpatient rehab center in Arizona for 6 months that would teach me how to live life on a daily basis and how to be responsible, balance my checkbook, right? I was making hundreds and thousands of dollars, yet my bank account was always overdrawn, always. Because I would go out and people would say, I don't have any money. And I'm like, doesn't matter, I got you. And I would pay for everybody. It was like, I'm not going to drink alone. Friends don't let friends drink alone. I got you. And I would buy shots for everybody, drinks for everybody, hundreds of dollars, didn't matter. So this person said, you need to go to a rehab center. And I'm like, there's no way in HELL that Brandi Kowal, the Kowal daughter, can go to rehab. You know what that'll do to my family? You know what my last name is Kowal. My dad has lived here since he was 1 year old. My parents went to the same high school. We all went to the same high school. I cannot shame my family that way. And so I went cold turkey. My boyfriend and I quit drinking because he too had and has an amazing heart. So we quit drinking because he wanted to as well. Like, remember, he flushed that cocaine down the toilet dozens of times because he really didn't want it in his life. But I was so persuasive, so manipulative, so convincing. Yet he didn't want to quit smoking pot. He's like, look, I'll quit drinking with you. Just allow me to taper off weed. I've been smoking pot for like 20 years. I'm like, okay. So I quit drinking cold turkey for 9 months. Oh my gosh, life was so good. I was able to keep some money and actually go visit my aunt. I hadn't seen my aunt or my cousins in like 4 or 5 years, and they were my best friends. I spent almost every single year with them, and I lived with them. And I hadn't been able to put any money together to go visit them. So I remember I went to visit them. We went skiing. My cousins were so excited to see that like I had finally gotten on track and been the Brandi that they've always known and loved. And my boyfriend had told me that once he went to go visit his family, he would quit smoking pot and we would be 100% clean. And so we went and saw his family back on the East Coast, and he was so nervous about it. So he smoked pot during that time, but then he promised me. Well, I came home from another trip that summer and he was high and he threw that promise out the window. So then I was like, F it. And I called my drug dealer that day. I remember having 2 margaritas, called my drug dealer, and it was on and cracking once again. Yet this time it was even worse. And in that time of sobriety, I went and got my esthetician's license because I was like, I need to get out of the restaurant industry. If I'm going to be sober, it would be best for me to actually like go learn a trade. At one point, I had tried to go get my hairdresser's license, right? Because I grew up in that hair salon, but my drinking was so out of control, I could not show up for class every morning at 8:30. So now that I was sober, I was going to go get my esthetician's license because I love makeup, I love skincare. So during that 9 months of sobriety, I went and got my esthetician's license and got a job at an amazing medical day spa, making awesome money and doing what I loved and impacting one woman at a time, one heart at a time every day. It was so cool. Well, then I relapsed and I went right back to where I was, except even worse. So now I have to show up as this professional esthetician in this gorgeous day spa. And I did for a while. Yet it was so intense because I'm working one-on-one with women. So I knew that I couldn't drink a whole lot. So my cocaine turned into even more because I wasn't able to drink so late at night because I didn't want to smell the next day. So I would have snot just like dripping down my face. And I would tell everybody I had a sinus infection. And I constantly had a sinus infection. So more lies, living that double life. In March 10th, 2010, it was my best friend's birthday, and we went skiing. And we came home from skiing, and I was so drunk that I knew that the only way to go on with the rest of my day was to have cocaine. So I called my drug dealer, and he was across town. I was like, I don't care, I'll do whatever it takes. And I go out in a snowstorm and drive across town and ended up getting in a car accident. I ended up hitting somebody from behind. And I tried to talk my way out of it. I told the guy, I'm like, look, I just live a couple miles up the road. My boyfriend always had thousands of dollars in the safe because we were transferring marijuana back and forth, like hundreds and thousands of dollars. So there was almost always 5 to 10 grand in the safe. I'm like, I'll pay you $5,000. I can't remember the exact amount, but I was doing my best. Well, somebody else had called the cops. The guy was this close to accepting me and not calling the cops, but other people had already called the cops. I was still in my snow gear. I had cocaine in my car while I'm hearing cop cars come. I'm doing as much cocaine as I can right there in my car. And what was it? I want to say I put it underneath the mat. I put my cocaine underneath the mat, or I threw it out the window. I might have thrown it out the window because the cops came and I got arrested. And I remember my lawyer telling me, I was listening to the interaction between you and the cop, and it sounded like you guys were on a first date, not you being arrested. Because by now I was pretty much an expert manipulator and I would get people to talk. And yeah, I might have even still had the cocaine on my body, to be honest with you, because they never found it in the car. And I ended up pleading to a second DUI because I had told my lawyer that I had cocaine. And she's like, well, right now they're not charging you with a felony. Cocaine is a felony and you will have that on your record forever. And so let's just go ahead and accept this. And so I did. And I had to wear an ankle bracelet. And you would have thought that like that would have been my wake up call. And it wasn't. I still kept partying, kept working. My boyfriend would take me to work every morning, go home, do his thing. He would pick me up at 5:00 and we would go to the bar. And I would time it. He'd pick me up at 5. He'd always be hungry, right? Because he was a stoner. He'd pick me up at 5. We'd go to the bar, and I worked with a nurse practitioner. And so she constantly was giving me antidepressants because she could see my high and low. So she's like, here, you need to try this antidepressant. Try this antidepressant. Try this antidepressant. And then I would tell her I couldn't sleep. I was always so tired because I couldn't sleep. So she would give me sleeping pills. So I would time it, Marianne, to where it was like, okay, I can do cocaine from 5:30 till about 10:30. So I can drink and do cocaine for about 5 hours. And then I'll take my like 3 times the amount of antidepressant. I'll take my sleeping pill and I'll go to sleep. And then when I wake up, I'll drink my vodka and orange juice. And I will take 2 more of my antidepressants. So it'll skyrocket me. And I started doing that for like 3 or 4 months. And this sounds like the craziest rock bottom, because you would think that all of these different things would have been my rock bottom. However, my boyfriend at the time, I took pride on the fact that I hadn't cheated on him. And we had been together for probably about 4 years by now, 4 or 5 years by now. And I had never cheated on him. And he knew all of this stuff was going on. He knew all of this was going on. So like, he knew the truth. And he went away for a month, and I ended up cheating on him during that time. And that was like, Marianne, I didn't have one person in the world that I was honest with. Not one. I didn't have one person in the world that I was honest with. And I remember sitting in my kitchen on the floor with my head in my hands, wondering, how did I get here? How did I get here? I don't know what to do. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep up with this anymore. And my nieces look at me like I'm like a superstar. And all my endeavors are thrown out the window, and I don't even know who I am anymore. I can't do this anymore. And I had a girlfriend of mine who was the woman that introduced me to network marketing. I was honest with her. You know, she is a great woman. I love her so much. She is a great woman. And at the time, she didn't know any different, right? With network marketing, she was only doing what those people taught her to do. So I hold no fault against her at all, right? And so we stayed in touch all those years. And partly because she wanted me to keep joining all the other network marketing companies, but also because she saw me like a little sister, and I loved her and I felt safe with her. So I would share with her everything that was going on. And so she knew the truth. She knew how bad it was, because everybody else, I just hid behind text message. I would just text all the right things to say. I would send pictures and have everybody thinking that everything was fine. And she said, look, why don't you come spend some time with me? Let's get you out of there. I live in Utah. Come to Utah. I live in a canyon. It's gorgeous. Come get away. And I'm like, I don't know how, like, what am I going to say? And she's like, just, you need to get some time away. And by now, like, people were really, really noticing and realizing that things were way worse than anybody could have ever imagined. Yet nobody knew to the extent. However, I did. And that was tormenting, because I loved all of those people and I had hurt every single one of them. And so I got on a plane. And by the time I got to Utah, I didn't have any money. I called a girlfriend. She gave me a buddy pass. And by the time I got to Utah, my girlfriend Diana looked me in the eyes and she said, you're going to go to rehab. I'm like, what? She's like, you're going to rehab. I've already made the calls. I'm like, I can't go to rehab. She's like, no, Brandi, it's already done. Like, I've already talked to your family. I've already talked to your mom. I'm like, you know, and she told me, I found you a program. She's like, I've been on the phone for 3 days now. She said, because you're single, because you're white, because you have no children, and because you're a female, there's zero financing available for you. None. If you were a male, if you were married, if you had children, or if you were single, white, whatever the opposite of all those things are, there would be financing for me. There would have been financing for me. There would have been rehab programs that would have been free, but there was nothing. She's like, and I know how dynamic you are. So you can't go to just any rehab center. She's like, so I found you a faith-based rehab center that realizes that the brain is connected to all of this. And so they take you off of sugar, they take you off of caffeine, and they don't allow smoking. And there's only 8 people that are going to be in this home with you. You actually have a personal chef. They have a chef as part of it because they know that nutrition is directly correlated to addiction. And so I have sought out this place for you. It's an intimate setting that works on you from the inside out, and that's where you're going. It was called Cold Creek Wellness Center out of Utah, Colorado. And it was $18,000 for 45 days. And so I went, and our church, our family's church, actually paid for some of it for me. And then Diana raised some money for me as well. And then my parents paid a portion of it, which even to this day, my dad doesn't know how much money was paid out towards it because he never thought I had a problem. He never understood why I couldn't just stop it. Right? He knew, I shouldn't say he never thought I had a problem. He knew I had a problem. He knew I had an issue, but like he couldn't understand why I couldn't just look in the mirror, see that I am all put together, see that I was always the top sales at whatever company I worked for, that I was customer service all-star, #1 in sales, #5, like top 5 in sales. Why can't she just look in the mirror? She doesn't have a problem. So when he found out I was going to rehab, he was pissed. And we didn't talk. And that was really hard. So I went to this program for 45 days. And I honestly, Marianne, I came out knowing that I've got a problem and that I cannot ever touch alcohol again. So I'm stopping because I just realized how late it is. I've never gone in depth with my story like this, ever.
I've canceled everything. Please carry on. This is really, this is
I'm so sorry.
No, don't be sorry. Gosh, you've told me some of it, but you've gone into the details. And I think they're not sordid in a sense. They're just very honest. And I think your honesty is the most powerful tool that you have. I can't tell you how many families I know that have gone through where the father is the achiever and you can do better and all the things you're telling. It's just going to hit so many, it's going to resonate with so many people because they've been there. They've been that parent. It's typical of the baby boomer parents that we want our children to achieve, and we keep telling them how marvelous they are and how they're going to change the world. And people need to hear what you're saying. Because I actually started a school because of this thing that goes on, where children don't get marks, they don't write exams, but they do their academic work, and they get a report that's about their character and how well they've applied themselves. In other words, they're being their best self. No comparisons. And we were criticized about it in the beginning, and now I'm seeing how very important it is because they're still parents. We had a 3-year-old kid. And the mother just loved our school and she loved the ethos, and the kids were being taught to eat healthy and grow food and learning so many things. And it's just so wonderful. And the father removed the child from the school because he wants the child to compete and win at sport and be the top academic and put her into a very expensive school because he needs her. It's almost like he needs her to win. And so what you're telling, I don't think you realize it's every single word that you're talking about, the lying, everything. I have seen this movie in several people and heard there's been bits and pieces, but you've put it together. So this is like a Netflix series, man. This is the most powerful story. It's going to be a Netflix series. Watch this space, girl. Just carry on from that. I hope you can remember. You came out of rehab.
Yeah, no, I remember.
Go for it. I'm not going anywhere.
So the beautiful woman, Diana, who brought me and exposed me to this rehab center, she was a part of another incredible network marketing business who taught about alkalining your body. And I remember they had a product called Green 2O, and the company was called Live. And they were all about the owner of the company was a scientist, and he was all about like the nutrition behind the brain and alkalining your body. And so she gave me this green drink to drink while I was in the rehab center. And I was doing cocaine and alcohol right up until the day before I went into rehab, because I was only with Diana for a day, and that day was horrific. Like between getting on the airplane and going there, I actually no, I remember now I drank on the airplane as well, because I told her, I'm like, I have nothing to hide. And she knew that I had a drinking problem. And when I was in the rehab center, because I had this green drink to help alkaline my body, because I wasn't allowed the caffeine or the sugar, and we had somebody preparing delicious, healthy food for us, I didn't have any withdrawals. I didn't detox and have like crazy withdrawal symptoms. Whereas other people who were in the rehab center, even though they were doing no sugar, no alcohol, no smoking, and having the food prepared for them, they were still going through withdrawals. It was only maybe for like a week instead of 2 to 3 weeks. However, they were still having them and I didn't. And so that company was amazed. They were like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. So what do you think they did? They made me a story. And I was excited about it. To be honest with you, I was like all for it. I'm like, yes, I have known since I was a little girl that I was made to impact people's lives. And if I can, help other people be able to not have to withdraw when they're coming off drugs and alcohol, then I'm all for it. However, it was a 17-year drug and alcohol addiction struggle that I went to a 45-day program. And I remember the day we got out, we went straight to the home office so that the office could meet me. And I pretty much became their poster board that next couple of months, their poster child that next couple of months, and rose to the top of the company and was one of the top execs. And Diana hired me on as her personal assistant so that I could stay in Utah and be her personal assistant and help grow this business and travel the world and change lives, right? Like all the things that I wanted to do. However, in 45 days, I did not learn how to take any kind of ownership of my life, be responsible, run a business. Like I didn't know how to like wake up on time. Like it was, and Diana, I can share this, when she sees it, she'll know she struggled with codependency and enabling and being enmeshed. And she saw her little baby sister doing the best that I could with what I knew. And so she continued to just give me money and allow me to sleep and not really hold me accountable to the things that I needed to do. And I would show up at these events and tell my story and put a smile on my face. And within a few months, I had like completely downward spiraled into a depression. And I was sleeping 12 and 16 hours a day. And Diana was on the road traveling. She lived in the most gorgeous canyon in Utah. However, we were 45 minutes away from everything around us. So this girl who loves to talk to people and be around people and gets fired up by being around other like-minded people was like, and I had met a couple right when I got out of rehab, Carlos and Chantel Campos. At the time, they were just dating. And we all went out and sang karaoke. And Chantel had worked in a children's home. She had worked in a children's home for about 13 years. And I can remember her telling me that when she saw what they were doing with my story, she remembered thinking like, that's too much. It's too much, too fast for her. And it like hurt her heart because she could see the light in me. And she knew what was on the other side of like too much, too fast. And so they went back to where they lived in California, and I went back to Utah. And about 5 months later, so I got out of rehab in October, and I saw Carlos in April. And he was like, whoa, what happened to you? Where is the girl that we met back in October? Where's that light? Where's that joy? Where's that confidence? What is going on? And I had let him know that I had been struggling. I had been, feeling lost, that Diana was gone all the time. And I didn't know what else to do besides sleep. And it was the year that I had my DUI. So I wasn't able to have a driver's license. I didn't get my driver's license for a year. And so he called Chantel and he's like, hey, you remember Brandi? And she's like, of course I do. And he shared with her what was going on. And she's like, bring her to our home. Bring her to our home. And so I drove with Carlos from Arizona to California. And Chantel took me under her wing. And I remember she took me out to the jetty out in Oceanside, California. And she took me out to the rocks. And she taught me about like having compassion and like healing the little girl and not having to measure up. And she shared things that I had never heard before. And they welcomed me into their home and they said, Brandi, why do you need to go back to Utah? If you're doing network marketing, like you can do it here. And so they're like, why don't you just stay? Just stay here with us. Allow us to love on you. And it was so rad because I had never been around a healthy marriage. Like, yes, my parents are still married to this day, and they have a super awesome, thriving marriage that works for them. However, I did hear both of my parents talk about what they didn't like about the other one behind their back. And then with boyfriends and growing up and the friends that I chose to hang around, it was just normal, right? Like, hello, it's just normal to like bash your spouse or bash your boyfriend. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? It's like as soon as they leave the room, you get with your girlfriend and you just start like nitpicking what, is going on. I honestly thought that was like normal. I mean, that was on the TV shows, but Beverly Hills, 90210, Melrose Place, right? I grew up watching all those. And Chantel never once, never, ever once spoke negatively about Carlos. Ever. I was like, what the heck, girl? Like, come on, like, give me the dirt. So it was so rad because I got to see a whole new perspective, literally a whole new world. And her mom had done emotional healing work and counseling as well. And so her mom took me under her wing and I started doing sessions with her. And we would do emotional healing sessions. And Chantel taught me about like my little girl, the little girl that's inside of me that was needing compassion and nurture and care. It was so foreign to me, yet so intriguing, right? And like there was something in my spirit that was like, yes. So even though my brain and my mind was like, this does not make sense. And I initially thought that like, okay, well, maybe tomorrow she'll give me the dirt, like maybe the next day. And so I stayed with them for a while, for a couple of months. And then that next network marketing company came along with the next big thing. And the group of people that we were working with, that first company that helped me alkaline my body, they had found another company. And so they called me up and said, oh my gosh, you have to get on this call. I want you to meet so-and-so. He's been in the industry for years and he can help people make tens of thousands of dollars. And his heart is amazing. You're going to love him. He's so awesome. And this company is brand new. They're just starting. So they're going to put all of us in right at the top. And then anybody else that comes in is going to go directly under them. I'm like, sweet, I'm in. So I get on the phone and oh my gosh, it was incredible. And it was a 84-day health challenge. You take these products, you do this challenge for 84 days and you share your before and after pictures. And yeah, it's rad. You want to do a challenge? Who doesn't want to do a challenge? So I'm like, sweet, I'm in. And so I went all in and I took the products and I had fun with it. And they made it out like a party. And so I started asking people like, hey, you want to do this challenge with me? Hey, you want to do this challenge with me? They're like, sure. And then the gentleman would get on the phone with them and they would talk. And next thing you know, they didn't want to just do the challenge. They wanted to be a part of the business too. And so I was on the phone for 12, 16 hours a day. I was talking to people in Alaska. I was talking to people in New York. I was talking to people in other parts of the world because I was so excited. I was so invigorated, right? And it was like the first time that I had felt so alive in such a long time. And then this gentleman would talk to everybody for me on the business side of things. I didn't have to know any of the business stuff. I just needed to get him on the phone with somebody. And man, I kid you not, I became an overnight success there. I got the Mercedes. I was making like $2,000 a week within just a couple of weeks. I had people leaving. My uncle left his career that he had been in for 26 years to come join this company. And all of these people that like, I didn't think would ever join me were like, yes, 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 yes. And next thing you know, I had this like humongous organization and bam, was an amazing, incredible story. I can remember writing letters to people being like, my ship has finally come in. This is great. So I rode those coattails for the next 6 months. My brother lived in Dallas, Texas, and the home office just so happened to be in Dallas, Texas. And my older brother, Tommy, championed me. He was my best friend growing up. He was 6 years older than me, yet we talked. And he was one of those brothers that like would just listen. And so we talked on the phone. It was so funny. Like he had more girlfriends in high school than like probably guy friends that he didn't date them. They were just his friends. My dad would always laugh like, how does Tommy talk on the phone so much? So Tommy, he saw that his sister was sober. I had been sober for over a year now. And he's like, this is incredible. And I'm having success with this company. And so he said, you know what? You can move to Dallas. I'll uproot my life. I'll get a 2-bedroom apartment and you can come here. And so I moved to Dallas and I was going to start my career. I had a team in Oklahoma. I was so ready. I moved all my stuff from Denver, all my stuff from California. I finally had all of my things, all my stuff from Utah. I finally had everything in one place. I was 30 years old. I was an adult. I was taking responsibility. I had a career. I was ready to go. I couldn't get a car loan at the time. So my brother even signed a car loan for me, like got me a car. I had this super cute little black 2-door Honda Accord. We lived in this gorgeous apartment complex that had a sparkling pool. I mean, I'm a girl from Anchorage, Alaska, and now I have a swimming pool right outside my door. I thought that like my life was the best ever. I had a sunroof in my car. I had a walk-in closet. Everybody was just like singing my praise. And man, life was awesome. However, my story was over. Can only sell a story for so long until you need to sell a new one. And so those leaders jumped ship and went to another person to promote a story. And now I had a humongous team of people going, I want to do what you did, Brandi. Well, what I did was get excited and share what I was doing, and then got them on the phone with somebody who had been doing this for over 20 years. Well, so they were trying to like get excited and share what they were doing and then get them on the phone with me. I didn't know what to say. So once again, I'm here in this gorgeous apartment complex having everything that I've ever wanted, right? For so many years during my struggle, it was always like, when you get a new boyfriend, when you get a different job, when you move out of Anchorage, when you get on the right medications, when you have more sunshine, when you're in better weather, I can literally remember Marianne laying in bed talking to my mom, being like, Mom, I don't get it. All of the things that people have told me my whole life, that when I had these things, I would be happy. I have all of them. And I'm so depressed. I can't get out of bed. I could not get out of bed. And I was going to psychiatrists, and they were giving me medication after medication after medication after medication after medication. And by now I had reached out to MAC Cosmetics to see if I could be a freelance artist, because people were starting to fall off and my paycheck wasn't cutting it anymore. Because I didn't know how to teach business. So I started working for MAC, was doing makeup, and that was bringing in some money. But if I wasn't a full-time employee, I could only work a certain amount of hours. And slowly but surely, my confidence was going darker and darker and darker and darker and darker. Till finally, I decided to have that first drink. And so I did. I drank and didn't black out. So I went to my psychiatrist and let them know that I drank and didn't black out. And they're like, well, that's a good sign. It means you're not addicted. Because if you were really addicted, you would have blacked out. So they totally gave me permission to drink again. So I did. I remember I went and had sushi and I had sake, totally blacked out. The next day I was sicker than a dog. My brother asked if he could borrow my car. I'm like, yeah, sure. He comes upstairs. He goes, oh my gosh, what happened? I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, there's puke all over your car. I had drove the night before, don't remember any of it, puked all over my car, told him I must have gotten food poisoning. And he wasn't stupid by any means, but he didn't know how to handle me. Like he didn't know what to do. And so he was like, oh, okay. So I went about a week or so, didn't touch any alcohol or anything. And then it just kept tapping at my shoulder. It just kept tapping at my shoulder. And I also was super down and out that I had lied to my brother, because my brother totally uprooted his life for me and like opened his doors and moved everything to help me get a hand up. And now I've lied to him. And so I started drinking again. And I can remember going to a restaurant and seeing a guy and asking him if he could find me some cocaine. And he's like, why do you want to have cocaine? Like, why don't you just like smoke cocaine and I'll find you some sex? And Marianne, I wish I could tell you what happened next, but I can't. All I know is I woke up in bed with him. I woke up in bed with him, hearing my brother close the door to our apartment and seeing that my bedroom door was open. And so I freaked out, slammed my door. It's like, hey, Tom. I'm like, yeah, I have somebody over, right? You know, I'm 30 years old, right? He's 36. Like, that's what you do. Like, it's my apartment too. Like, once again, like he didn't fully know. And so that kid left, was hungover to hell for a couple of days on that one, and continued to go to my psychiatrist. They continued to tell me they didn't think that I had a problem. I remember that was so weird, that I was on the wrong meds. That's what it was. I was on the wrong meds. So I remember going to Buffalo Wild Wings after I got done with one of my counseling appointments and ordering a drink. And I look over and there's the guy that I had gone home with, or had come home with me. And he goes, oh my gosh, I thought I'd never see you again. Well, come to find out, this kid grew up growing meth, grew up with drugs and alcohol his whole entire life, was wanting to get his life back on the straight and narrow. When he met me that night, he didn't even have enough money to even have a cell phone. That's why we didn't exchange phone numbers. And he was like, oh my gosh, like that night was so fun. Da, da, da. Like, and I probably bought me a shot or something. I don't fully remember. All I know is that next 6 weeks turned into me saying and doing those last I nevers that I said I would never do. And I ended up getting involved in a relationship with somebody who is well experienced with doing drugs intravenously and smoking crack. And he only lived about maybe 2 miles from my house. So it was so weird. In Dallas, Texas, there's an area where it's like gorgeous, amazing where we lived. And then just a couple miles over, it took me less than 5 minutes to drive to his house. It was the ghetto, the straight up ghetto. And he was living in this 1-bedroom, tiny, tiny, tiny apartment. Like literally when you walked in the door, you took the first step in, your right foot's in the living room, your left foot is in the kitchen. Well, depending on which foot you step first, right? And then if you go step to the left, you're in the bedroom. And then if you step to the right, you're in the bathroom. Like it was so tiny. And it was him and another gentleman who lived there. And I would stay with them. And I would tell my brother through text message, I met somebody, I'm dating somebody, things are going well. I was working at Mac, right? So I would send him pictures of me, like being all dressed up and doing good. And my psychiatrist had me taking vitamin B12 shots. So I had those little tiny, tiny needles, and they would give me B12 shots and just taught me how to do them myself. So one of the days that we were at my apartment, that guy saw all my needles because I had over 100 needles because you're supposed to throw them away every time. So he's like, you have needles? You know how much people pay to get these things? He's like, oh my gosh. So we started doing cocaine intravenously. And then he asked me, would you be, and it was so crazy. The drug dealer that we had worked at 7-Eleven. So I was going to work at Mac Cosmetics. I was going to Costco to buy a hot dog and a Coke because it was only $1.50. And that was my way. Like that was how much I wanted to allocate my money to, because I only had a certain amount of hours I could work a week. And I had everything budgeted out. Right. And the gentleman that I was dating, I remember even telling him, if you're going to be a waiter, like go be a waiter at like a 5-star restaurant. He would make like $11 on his shift. And I'm like, what are you doing, dude? You have a great personality. Like, let's get you some different clothes and like go work where you're actually going to make some money. But he just couldn't wrap his head around it. So I was providing the money for everything. And the 7-Eleven person would slide me $20 worth of cocaine when I would go purchase my beverage. And a lot of times I would be purchasing those alcoholic energy drinks. Oh gosh, I'm like I haven't gotten this in depth. Being taken back there is just so crazy to me. So he had asked me, do you want to go visit my family? I haven't had a car. He didn't drive. He didn't have a car. So I let him use my car all the time. He's like, hey, your next 3-day weekend, can we go down and see my family? They live like 2 hours south of here. So I'm like, sure. My heart was like, oh my gosh, you haven't seen your family for 2 years and you only live a 2-hour drive away? Yes, of course. Well, it was his family that cooked meth. And even though he prepared me and told me, don't you touch this stuff, okay? They're good people, but don't touch it. When we got there, I saw that she had all her teeth. He had all his teeth. And she was like, Brandi, he told me that you don't do meth, you do cocaine. So we got you your cocaine, but just wondering, why don't you want to do meth? Like the meth high is so much better. And I'm like, really? She's like, oh yeah, and you don't get the runny noses. And she like starts like selling me on it. She's like, here. I'm like, okay. And I remember he came in, and when I told him that I had done it, he started crying. He's like, Brandi, no. You know how many people I have seen die from this? No. I'm like, dude, chill out. Like, it's not going to be that bad. Well, it was. It was. And that turned into me calling all my friends and family to find every reason I could to have them put some money in my bank account. That ex-boyfriend of mine that I went to rehab with the first time and was growing marijuana with, I played the guilt trip on him big time. I need you to give me money. I need you to give me money. And I was starting to do meth like every day and would be on like 2 and 3 day runners. And it was a high that allowed me to still be able to function. That's what was so crazy. And so towards the very end of things, I was looking as nice as I look now, if not even nicer, doing makeup at a MAC Cosmetic Pro store, being the #1 in sales, while going into the parking lot and smoking meth in my car during my lunch break. The only reason I got out of there was because I ran out of money. I legit ran out of money. And my escape plan was going to be to take a trip to Utah. I had somebody that I had met in Utah during that first network marketing company, and I had told them, like, I need help. And they struggled with codependency and enabling as well. And they were like, whatever I can do to help you, you're so amazing. I want to see you succeed. So my plan was to go there for 5 days and detox and not have anybody know that anything was wrong with me. Yet there was one woman that I had opened up to before I was leaving. I had let her know what was really going on because her brother had struggled with meth and had been in and out of rehab. And so I couldn't keep up with the lies. Like, that was the thing, is it's like, it ate me alive. It really was eating me alive. And so I told Becca the truth. And I told everybody else, I'm just going to get away to see my friends in Utah. And I went to get on the plane. It was on a buddy pass. And my luggage went, but the plane was full and I couldn't get on the plane. So I had a choice. I either call my brother and have him come pick me up, or I call my drug dealer, because I had about $50 to my name. So I called my drug dealer. My drug dealer came and picked me up. And I remember we went back to the house and we did meth all night that night. And I had texted everybody that I was safe. I'm in Utah. All is well. See you in a few days, except for Becca. I had told Becca the truth. Well, little did I know that Becca had a best friend of hers die on her watch, and she wasn't going to have it again. And so Becca called her older brother, who was now clean from meth, and told him, I promised Brandi I wouldn't tell anybody. I swore her to promising. And he said, she is not in her right mind. Like, you've got to let her family know. So she called my brother bawling at like 5 a.m. He's like, hey, calm down. Brandi's good. She's in Utah. She texted me. She's like, no, she's not. By now, I was on a plane because I did see, because I was out of money. I couldn't stay there. And they weren't going to give me any drugs for free. And so I went back to the airport and they told me the flight to Utah is full. And I looked the woman in the eye and I said, I've got $20 to my name. I have been on a runner for about 4 days now. I have to get out of Dallas. Please, whatever it takes to get me out of here. Because I made sure I had that alcohol money, because I knew I needed to keep my alcohol blood level at a certain level. And so she goes, I have a flight to Los Angeles. You can take a flight to Los Angeles and then to Denver and then to Utah. I'm like, okay, I can at least get to Denver. She's like, everything's wide open to LA and to Denver. You might still struggle getting to Utah. And I'm like, well, I know people in Denver, so at least get me to Denver. Well, I didn't know behind the scenes, Becca was making these phone calls. And by the time I got to LA, everybody in my family knew. And everybody was pretty freaked out. Yet I was able to calm everybody down with saying all of the right things, letting them know that things had been exaggerated and don't worry about it. And I was totally drunk because not only did I have my $20, but I got people to buy me drinks on the plane and buy me drinks at the airport. And I remember getting to Denver, calling my aunt, who was my best friend. She's like, "Woman, I've been thinking about you." She's like, "Man, I miss you so much. How are you doing? Oh my gosh. I've been meaning to call you for the last couple of months. What is new, girl?" I'm like, "Oh, just had a needle in my arm with meth and been melting cocaine and snorting cocaine and smoking meth and drinking. And I'm now in Denver." And she's like, just like, blah, 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 blah. And even to this day, like, she hasn't fully even told me how that impacted her. But it was so rough that she couldn't even bring herself to picking me up from the airport. And I always wondered why, like, how mean. Yet, my gosh, are you kidding me? Like, what do you say to that? So one of my friends picked me up, took me to a girlfriend's house, helped me detox. Like I said, by now, we all knew that I was going to need to go to rehab again. Or I shouldn't even say we all knew that I was needing to go to rehab again. Nobody really knew what to do with me. And I didn't know what to do with me either. My father was absolutely beside himself. And by the grace of God, his landscape company, not his landscape, by the grace of God, his construction company had him working for 6 weeks, about 6 hours away from my hometown. So he was out of town. But my brother told him what was going on, and my mom, and he was just irate. And I had zero money, zero. Both of my bank accounts were negative. I exhausted all resources. My parents, unbeknownst to my father, my mom was still paying off my rehab. So it wasn't even an option for me to go back to that rehab center. It had only been like 18 months since I left. So the only option was for me to go to the Salvation Army Rehab Center in Anchorage, Alaska, because it was $10 a day, 90 days, $900. And they initially told me that I would be able to get in right away. So I flew up to Anchorage, and paperwork and phone calls 6 weeks later is how long it took for me to get into rehab. And that first week, Marianne, I did not have that green drink that helped me alkaline my body. And my amount of using was way more intense than it was prior. And I laid in my mother's bed screaming to the top of my lungs, "Please just kill me. Just kill me. I just want to die. I just want to die." And my gorgeous spiritual mother, who doesn't have a mean bone in her body, didn't know what to do with me. And she heard the Lord tell her, "Just go hold her. Just go hold her." And so my mom did. God removed my dad from the situation and allowed the space for my mom to just lay and hold me. And that's what she did for days. She just laid and held me as I cried, as I shivered, as I shook, as I screamed, "I just want to die." She's incredible. She is an incredible woman. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her. So poor thing, she thought that they were going to be able to get me in right away. And like I said, it took about 6 weeks. And so after about a week of detoxing, I mean, my body was in so much pain, I couldn't stand up straight. So we were taking me to the chiropractor. And my chiropractor had known me since I was a little girl. And he told my mom, one of my massage therapists, she does a 12-step program. It's not AA, but she's helping women all the time. Women are coming in and out, and I see her taking women to lunch, and maybe she can connect with Brandi, because I never did a 12-step program coming out of that first rehab center. I was like, I know that I'm an alcoholic. So I don't need any freaking kumbaya 12-step program. I don't need to say these little chants and whatever, like I'm better than that. And some of the people that came into our rehab program, they had tattoos and their clothes were a mess and they would smell. And I'm like, ugh, this Nordstrom girl. So I met with Lori. Her name was Lori. And I remember, because I thought every week that the next week I was going to go in, and it kept dragging out and dragging out and dragging out. And I started drinking. I had convinced everybody that I didn't have a drinking problem. I had a meth problem. I was a cocaine and a meth addict, not an alcoholic. So it's okay for me to drink. So I would like steal money from my parents' change jar and go get vodka shooters and put them in my water bottles and go on bike rides to be healthy and be hydrated. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, my father ended up coming home from his working experience, and my parents don't drink. And so people had gifted us some red wine. Well, I took the red wine seal and I took the aluminum and squeezed it and pulled it off the foil, drank it, put the cork back in, put the foil back on, and then put it back up on the shelf. Well, my father came home and my father was like, he saw right through it right away. And he came in because I had to drink in order to go to sleep, Marianne. Because as soon as my blood alcohol started dropping and the facade in my brain was more of a reality, I was envisioning everything that had just happened in Texas and what I had done to my brother. That was the hardest part for me, was that my brother completely opened up his life for me. And I did that to him. And I left everything there. Remember, I told you I was so excited to be 30 years old and have all of my things in one place finally. So I had this humongous, gorgeous, furnished apartment with a bedroom set and a walk-in closet and all the things, my own bathroom, everything. And it was all there for my brother to handle all on his own. And my dad came in screaming at me because I was laying in bed because I didn't have anything to drink that night. And so I was crying. I was sobbing, crying. And he came in screaming at me, "What the hell is wrong with you? Do you realize what you've done to this family? Do you realize how much pain you've caused your mother? This is an absolute tragedy. This is such a disgrace. I can't believe what you've done to your brother. How dare you? How dare you?" And I remember, Marianne, I was in so much pain. I stood up on my bed because my dad's super tall. I stood up on my bed and I looked him in the eye and I'm like, "You think I don't know? You think I don't know what I've done to this family?" Like, I don't know what else to do. And we got in this humongous screaming match. And I called my ex-boyfriend and I had him come pick me up. And I ended up staying at his house. The one I was growing marijuana with, I ended up staying at his house for the next week before I went to rehab. My mom would come visit me every day. She was so torn. And I did. And I started to reach out to Lori. and she was a part of Narcotics Anonymous. She was 9 years clean at the time. And she had 4 children. She was a massage therapist. She had her life put together, right? She was well put together. She was successful. She made money. And I remember Marianne, I said to her, am I going to be a toothless native? No. Am I going to be in there with a bunch of toothless natives? I was so judgmental. I did not even know it, because the Salvation Army Rehab Center took in the homeless people, took in the extreme addiction. We have, all the Aleutian Islands around us in Anchorage. And so all of the people from the outskirts that were living in the outskirts of Anchorage would come in for it. And I looked at her and I said, am I going to be in there with a bunch of toothless natives? And she's like, Brandi, you continue on the path that you're on, and you're going to be a toothless white girl sitting right next to them. This disease does not discriminate. And I was like, whoa. Like Lori's license plate of her car said hard knock life. Like God knew exactly who I needed to be working with, because she did not sugarcoat anything. I can remember I would go to meetings, and people would say, I'm 7 years clean, but I can't find a job. And I'm, couch surfing right now. And I would come out of the meeting and I'd be like, what the heck is wrong with these people? Like, why can't they get a job? Like and they don't even have their own place. They don't even have their own home. And she's like, you have not walked a day in the life of their shoes. And right now you've barely got 90 days under your belt. And that person has 7 years. So when you have 7 years clean, you can come and talk to me. She's like, don't you dare pass judgment on them. And that was the most incredible experience of my life. Hold on, I have something in my eye. That was the most incredible experience of my life, because I went into that place just wanting to die. I was about 195 pounds. I'm normally about 155. I was 195 pounds. And I had zero money to my name. Both of my bank accounts were negative. My bag was in Utah, right? I went on the standby flight. My bag went before me, but I didn't go on. So I had luggage in Utah. I had all my things in Dallas, Texas. I felt like such a failure. I had completely let my father and my family down. Just 3 months prior, Marianne, I was speaking on stages at a health and wellness conference. I had won an all expense paid trip to Cancun, Mexico. Called the company and said, hey, is there any way that I can actually just get the cash for that? I'm not going to be able to make the trip. And even got my mom to loan me the money. Hey, the company said they'll pay me cash. Will you deposit this amount of money in my bank account first? And now I'm in this rehab center with homeless people, with people who do like this to try and eat a bite of cereal. Like, oh man. Even I remember being, there was a handful of people who were overweight. Like, I'll just be real with you. I carried, a judgment against people who were overweight, or people who had tattoos all over their bodies. A crazy judgment against tattoos. Tattoos were not allowed in the Kowal household. My brothers would joke with my dad and say like, oh, I got a tattoo on my butt. And my dad's like, drop your drawers now. Like, tattoos were not allowed. So by the time I was 30 years old, I had a pretty intense judgment against tattoos. And so I walked around that place telling everybody, I'm only here because it's $10 a day. I literally just want to die. The only reason I'm here is because it's $10 a day. And I walked into that place on July 12th, 2012. And on July 28th, I remember because it was my cousin's birthday, a gentleman came in on July 28th, 2012. A gentleman came in and he started sharing stories about his experience. And I sat in the back corner. I sat in the back corner of the room with my arms crossed. There was about 50 people in the room. Big old black dude had a gold chain around his neck. I remember he was wearing like a white hat with a white coat and white shorts and white shoes. I'm like, who is this dude? Whatever. And he started sharing his experience. And I'm like, oh, I can relate to that. Oh, I can relate to that. Huh. Okay. Come to find out, he was sharing the 12 steps of Narcotics Anonymous. And by the time he got to the 12th step of having a spiritual awakening, I had a spiritual awakening in that moment. And it was like all of a sudden, I was like, oh my gosh. It is no wonder I have had such an attack on my life for so many years, because the enemy knows that when I'm in the dark, I'm bringing everybody with me. If friends don't let friends drink alone, right? So I'd pay for everybody. However, the enemy also knows that when I'm in the light, I bring everybody with me as well. And so he knows that if he can get me to get my hands on some substances, drugs, alcohol, food, sleep, right? Anything that I could be addicted to, that he doesn't have to mess with me anymore. And from that moment on, all of a sudden I was like, hell no. I am going to stand up and fight. I am going to stand up and do whatever I can to figure this thing out, because I am not going to allow him to take me out like this. And I went up to that gentleman and I heard him say, yeah, my wife celebrates 10 years or just celebrated 10 years. And I'm like, my sponsor, Lori, just celebrated 10 years. Huh. So I go up to him and I was like, hey, is your wife by chance Lori? And he's like, yeah, girl, I knew you about you before you even knew I knew about you. And my wife is Lori. And we are going to help you out and figure this thing out. And it was like, oh my word, you know? And so for me in that moment, I felt God's hand all over me and all over that whole experience. Because how can you organize that? You can't organize that. You know, like this was my chiropractor who had a massage therapist working for him. And then it just so happened that this gentleman was scheduled to speak at my rehab center months in advance, right? And then it just so happened that I had that spiritual awakening with him. And so that is one thing that I was able to go, okay, I did all the things. However, I didn't get a sponsor. I didn't work with somebody. I didn't join a community of people, a program where people could come alongside me and like give me their wisdom. So I called Lori that night because I had been pretty spotty with her. I called her that night and was like, okay, girl, tell me what to do. I'll do whatever it takes. And she's like, you call me every single day for the next 30 days. You miss a day, you start over. I'm like, what? Why? She's like, don't ask questions. She's like, would you be willing to, or if I asked you before you got into rehab, if I asked you, Brandi, were you doing the best you could with the hand you got? I would have said, absolutely. I was doing the best I could. Because I was, Marianne. I truly was doing the best I could. I was putting my best foot forward and like thinking that I could figure it all out, that I had control, right? And she's like, okay, I believe you. She's like, but look at where that got you. It's gotten you 2 rehabs in 18 months. She's like, so let's just put some of your best ideas on hold and let's use mine for a little bit and see how that works out. She's like, so I want you to call me every day for 30 days. I was like, okay. So I'm going to hit pause because I totally have to pee. And it is way beyond time. What do you want to do? Do you want to continue? Do you want to do round 2 another time? Like,
it's up to you, Brandi. I don't mind. How much longer do you think? I mean, another half an hour. I'm happy with that. If it's going to go longer, the time.
well, like, I mean, I'm just taking you through like step by step. I mean, we
I think
really
it's
are.
amazing. I think this is amazing, and I don't want you to lose your thread. If you're free and you can speak, speak. Because if we do it again, you won't look the same. Your heart may not be in the same place.
No, I
So
hear
I'm
you.
open to it. If you're happy to carry on, I am. Do you need to go pee? I'll go pee as well.
I do. Okay. I'm going to
Let's
go
both-
pee and I'm going to shoot my team a message as well. Okay.
Okay. Great.
All right.
Hey, Brandi. You there?
Yes. I don't know why it jumped off. I hope you weren't waiting long. Okay.
I know this couple of minutes. Absolutely
Okay.
fine. This is mind blowing. Absolutely mind blowing.
It is for me too. So thank you. I was not anticipating an experience like this at all.
Well, neither was I, but I knew that what you had to tell was very life-changing, and not only for people with addictions, but for parents and for friends. That's what's so important. You're telling all the detail. It's just so amazing. So you get going when you're ready. I'll push record. I'll record there. Okay. All right. All right, there you go.
So from that day on, I started working with Lori and I put my all into that program. And I'm getting choked up because I'm picturing some of the women's faces that I was with when I was in there. And I started praying with them. I started praying with the women that would be in my room. And then that turned into like, hey, you want to have a prayer circle? And by the time I left, I ended up having, we ended up having like 20 and 30 women in our prayer circle.
Wow, wow, wow.
And to this day, I still have a woman that has messaged me that she has stayed walking with Jesus ever since having an encounter with him because of me praying with her back in 2012. Yeah. Her name is Vanessa. She has the most beautiful spirit. And she grew up in a much rougher life than I did. And the fact that she's still alive is amazing. And she's messaged me just recently that she's still walking with the Lord. And it's because I chose to take time to pray with her and teach her how to pray and have a relationship with him. When I was in Salvation Army Rehab Center, they had a medical person and they did all these diagnoses on me. And so we took our meds every day. And so I had med call every morning and they had me on all these different medications, something to help me sleep, something to help me with anxiety, something to help me with depression, right? And by the time I was leaving there, I once again, wanted to make sure that I was getting myself back out there and getting a job right away, right? I had that performance-driven family and hello, look at me. Like I'm all put together now. I can hold down a job. So I called Nordstrom to see if Mac was hiring. And they just so happened, I remember the manager, she's so beautiful. The manager goes, wow, it sounds like you have a lot of leadership skills. She said, we happen to have an assistant manager position open up October 15th. Is there any way you'd be willing to wait? Well, I was getting out of rehab October 8th. So I was like, sure, no problem. I'm happy to wait. And I wanted to say, I remember thinking I didn't want to lie. Like my sponsor and I had talked about that. Like I didn't want to tell her I was in rehab, but I also didn't want to lie. And so I want to say that I had, said that I was unavailable or that I couldn't come in. Oh, I know. I went and interviewed on one of my day passes. So I would get passes. I would get like a 5-hour window to be able to go out with my mom. So I went out with my mom and went and interviewed. And so I was able to keep it under wraps that I was actually in rehab during the whole interview process. And then I got out and I was able to get a job right away. Super blessed. And because of my experience, they started me at the highest paying level. And then I also was the assistant manager. And now Jack and Tom Kowal's little sister, Dan and Sherry Kowal's daughter, co-wall daughter is working in Nordstrom Cosmetics in Anchorage, Alaska. And the reason I say it that way is because Anchorage is a town of about 300,000 people, and Nordstrom Cosmetics was the only cosmetic area. We didn't have Ulta. We didn't have any kind of cosmetic stores, Bed Bath and Beyond. None of that was around. So Nordstrom Cosmetics was like the spot. That's where I went every dance in high school for all of my dances, all of my like extracurriculars. That was the thing. You go and get your makeup done at Nordstrom. And so I did. I probably went and got my makeup done at Nordstrom's at least 15 times. And the woman that did my makeup 10 years earlier, she was now the manager, not the head manager, but she was the assistant manager. So she was like, oh my gosh, I remember you. So it was like, just so cool. And all these memories, and every single day somebody walked in and they knew me. And I was very open about my experience. That was the thing. It was like, I was so excited to help people have a hand up in being able to get clean and sober. Because I mean, my gosh, I had gone to 2 different rehab centers that were completely different, Marianne, right? One was $18,000 for 45 days, and then one is $900 for 90 days. And yet my desire is to combine them both, right? Because what I know now compared to what I knew then, when I got out of Salvation Army Rehab Center, I was still being prescribed a ton of prescription medications. And even though I was going to work and I was working a program and doing well, right? And was like working towards gain or losing that weight. And I would have my apple every morning and I was working out and all the things. I was struggling really bad with migraines. I struggled with migraines really, really bad. And I had struggled with migraines during my drug and alcohol addiction, especially with cocaine, right? Like I totally thought that my migraines were linked to cocaine and alcohol. So I honestly thought that once I got clean and sober, that like the heavens were going to open, the clouds were going to part, the angels were going to come down before me. Everything would be just like a gold paved yellow brick road for me to walk on, and life would be so smooth because I no longer am at drug and alcohol. You know, that was no longer holding me back because that seemed to be the thing that would trip me up every single time. And so now I'm like in my hometown, I'm 31 years old, I'm working at Nordstrom's. And the reason I say I'm 31 is because I was so excited about like feeling like a woman, feeling like a grown adult, you know, feeling like I had like finally arrived as an adult because I had never figured out like how to do life. And having that 12-step program and having that sponsor and that accountability, and then having the role of showing up to work 40 hours a week, like really helped me start to gain some traction. Yet I was struggling crazy with migraines. And so they were taking me, I was choosing to go to the doctor. I had incredible health insurance. And so I was going to the doctor, and the doctors were prescribing me so many different medications. I'm pretty sure Imitrex is a migraine medication. I mean, it's been so many years now, I don't remember. And there were so many. At one point, I was giving myself shots of migraine medicine in my legs, right? And nowhere ever at any time did anybody ever ask me about my diet, about what I was eating. Nobody ever asked me. And I spent thousands of dollars and dozens, if not hundreds of hours in the doctor's offices, because I would miss work for 2 and 3 days in a row sometimes because I would have migraines so bad that I was puking and like could not get out of bed. And I had to have the room completely pitch black. I would take my thumbs and dig them into my eyes. I would have ice on the nape of my neck. Oh, I get so fired up now because, you know, 3 years seeking out medical attention and chasing doctors. Actually, it wasn't 3 years. It was 18 months. It was that 18-month number again. So for the next like year and a half, Marianne, while I was clean and sober and working my program and doing well, I was seeking out doctors to figure out what was up with my migraines and changing lifestyle, right? I had been going back and forth with my ex-boyfriend, the seasons of Anchorage, right? It's super dark and cold in the winter. I was starting to get that downward spiral of depression, starting to sleep more. We couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy that the Lord just showed me that. That thought, Marianne, haunted me my whole life. What is wrong with you? Why can't you ever get it right? What is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? How can you not see that? What is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? And so that statement followed me into my teenage years, into my 20s, and now even into the beginning of my 30s. I'm like, what is wrong with me? I've gone to rehab. I've quit this. I've quit that. I've quit that. I've quit this. I've quit that. I've quit that. What is wrong with me? I always thought something was wrong with me. Even to this day, Marianne, that's like my default. And I'm so grateful I can catch it now. But that statement wants to creep in with me. What's wrong with you? Why can't you get it right?
So much is right with you, Brandi.
That was so intense
Wow.
of what is wrong with me. And I decide, okay, yes. Okay, now where I'm back. So I decided to take a leave of absence because, I remember now. Now it's hormonal. It's your hormones. It's because of your hormones. So I get on with a medical appointment for a hormone specialist, but I can't get in with her for 2 months. So I went through the holiday season. I remember laying in bed. Feeling so defeated because I had already gone to rehab twice. I had already let everybody in my family down. I had spent thousands and thousands of dollars. Why can't I just be happy? I don't understand. Why is it so hard to be happy? And I sure as heck can't tell anybody that I feel as dark as I feel on the inside, because they'll think I'm crazy. They'll think I'm an idiot, and they'll wonder, what's wrong with you? So I continued to put my makeup on, do my hair, wear my clothes, show up, and say all the right things. And finally, at the end of January, I got to have that appointment with the hormone specialist, because we had done so many other doctors and so many other things, even all naturalists, all natural remedies. And she said, she took a look at my list of medications I was on. She was like, I'm not touching you with a 10-foot pole. You need to get all of this in check before I'm going to evaluate your hormones. Oh my gosh. I had put everything on that appointment. Everything was on that appointment. And when she told me that, I felt so defeated. And my mom had come across Dr. Amen, Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. So Dr. Amen, I think he's based out of California, but his motto is change your brain, change your life. And she started doing some reading on food and what, how that could be impacting you, and different stories on ADD and ADHD, and how if you change your eating, that it actually can change the brain. However, he wants you to have a brain scan first, because if you break your elbow or your knee or your leg or whatever, you go get an x-ray before you take any medication or do what the doctors say. So why is it that we go to a counselor, we sit down, we talk to them for an hour, and then we just take whatever they say? Isn't it wise to get your brain scanned first duh, makes total sense. So
Yes,
we did,
okay.
so we did some research and found me a clinic. It was going to cost me $5,000. However, Nordstrom had like amazing insurance, and I want to say they covered maybe like 80% of it or something. They had an incredible, Nordstrom takes care of their employees like way above and beyond. And I'm so excited for that example, because that is how my husband and I are choosing to move in the direction with our companies as well. And I went and found a clinic in Colorado, and I went to where my aunt is, and I had a brain scan on like February 1st. I remember because it was the Super Bowl. I flew in on the Super Bowl that day. And so we were all so excited. And so I go do the 2-day study, pay the money. It's like 2 full days of getting your brain scanned. And Marianne, my family was so codependent and enmeshed and just enabling and enmeshed. We were all so enmeshed in each other's identities and lives and situations. At 31 years old, I had my aunt in the doctor's office with me, my grandmother in the doctor's office with me, and my mother on speakerphone. All of us were in there to find out what's wrong with Brandi. And so the doctor tells me that I had like some kind of anxiety going on in my brain, and I had bipolar, and I want to say one other thing. I can't fully remember, but the main 2 were bipolar and anxiety. And so he's like, we're going to have you on lithium. And to be honest with you, there were so many medications. I had a makeup bag that I took my makeup out of and put all my medications in. That's how many medications there were. And I remember thinking, I had been clean and sober for about 1.5 years by now. And I remember thinking, well, because I had completely lost the hope of ever having children. All I wanted when I was a little girl was to grow up and get married and have kids and have like the white picket fence with the 2-car garage and the dog, right? And like pack my husband lunch, walk my kids to school. It's all I had ever wanted. And by the time I was in my 20s, all of that had gotten thrown out the window. Because first of all, nobody wanted to marry me. And second of all, my value and my worth was so low that I didn't even see any hope. There was no silver lining. So fast forward to 31, I had been, clean for 1.5 years, working the Narcotics Anonymous program, being around people, seeing that they could get their lives back on track and even better than it was before. I had started having hope. And I remember saying to the doctor, well, what about when I want to have children someday? And he was like, well, we'll lower the dose. And I'm like, yeah, but it says lithium right here, like do not take while pregnant, like the side effects for lithium with pregnancy. He's like, yeah, well, we'd rather have a sane pregnant woman than a crazy one. And I remember my aunt and my mom being on FaceTime and my Nana all being like, yeah. And I remember, and no fault to any of them, right? Because they were only speaking what they knew, and they of course have my best interests at heart, right? Of course they do. And I wouldn't change anything about this story if I could. I really wouldn't, because I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for it. But I remember my mom telling me, Brandi, it's just like people who have high blood pressure. Like they've got to be on medication for the rest of their life. Like you just got to be on medication for the rest of your life. Like there's a lot of people out there, Brandi, that have to be on medication for the rest of their life. And so I was like, okay, I bought into the story that I would be on medication for the rest of my life. And that's what it looked like for the next probably year, roughly year and a half. And I continued on my journey. By now I have moved to Denver, right? I went and got my tests done in Denver, and I realized I'm 32 years old. at the time I'm 31. I'm 31 years old. I'm single, no kids. I love to travel. It's super expensive to travel from Anchorage. Why am I living in Anchorage when I could be living in the lower 48 and travel for just $100 round trip, right? And so I reached out to Nordstrom. They just so happened to have my exact same position available at that same store that I worked at 10 years prior, which was like so cool, going back to my original store 34, and was headed in as a beauty stylist. When you're a beauty stylist, you represent all of the products in the whole entire department. So I was no longer confined to just MAC. I now was a part of representing every single cosmetic line. And that was the blessing that my manager gave me in Anchorage, Alaska. She saw how much I loved the woman in front of me. She saw how much time and attention I put into that one woman right in front of me, that she didn't want me to be confined to one line. She wanted me to be able to customize whatever it was for that woman. And that's my mom as well, right? My mom teaching me about taking the time to have a heart-to-heart connection with the woman who's in front of you. And so I remember my manager in Anchorage promoting me to a beauty stylist. It was like a $5 an hour raise, and it was crazy, but she saw something in me that I didn't believe was in myself. And she showed me that it doesn't matter if it's a $15 lipstick or a $50 lipstick, that like, don't judge a book by its cover. You sit that woman down and you hear what her wants, desires, and needs are, and then you customize it for her. And I was so scared. I remember I was puking with anxiety my first shift. And finally, I got enough courage to sit a woman down and have a conversation with her. And she bought like $600 worth of makeup. And I was like, because in MAC, the price point is so low that if you got a $200 sale or $100 sale, it was like out of this world. But now all of a sudden, I was privy to 100 different cosmetic lines. So yes, I moved to Denver, was working at Nordstrom, was like on a roll. Things were going well. We got my diagnosis figured out. Everything was going to be great. And I found myself a couple months into it, starting to hit that downward spiral again. And I'm like, I cannot go here, because a relapse this time would be a relapse to meth. And that is a relapse to death. So I reached out to my good friends, Carlos and Chantel Campos, that I told you about earlier. They lived in they were still living in California. And I let them know that I was not in a good place. That ex-boyfriend of mine, I was so codependent and enmeshed with him that even though I lived in Denver, Colorado, we were still pretending to have some sort of relationship. And I can remember going psychotic on him at 24-hour fitness because I found out he was with somebody else. And I was screaming profanity, just horrific, right in front of everybody. I didn't care. I remember sitting in the locker room going, how did I let somebody have so much control over me? And once again, I thought once I got clean and sober, all of this was going to go away. And what I realized was that clean and sober was just like a circumstance. Like if I didn't take the time to really dig deep on why I was choosing to pick up drugs and alcohol, that really nothing was going to change. And that was December of 2014. And I can honestly say like that's probably when the real work started kicking in. Because even though I was on all those different medications, I was still struggling with migraines. And so I started reaching out to people in Denver, and the broad spectrum of people in Colorado were a lot more advanced than Anchorage. And I came across people who started telling me about my diet, talking to me about gluten, talking to me about sugar, talking to me about dairy. So I started eliminating different things. I was doing food allergy testing. They were having me poop in a bag, Marianne. I was like going to the bathroom in a bag and having to put the timestamp on it and mailing it off to people. Like I was so desperate. I was so desperate to figure out what was wrong with me that I was willing to do whatever it took. And I did. I spent thousands of dollars seeking out medical attention. And I came across a psychiatrist who looked at my laundry list of medications and she's like, ooh, we need to scale this back. And Beth was amazing. She's like, we're going to scale this way back and we're going to start doing some natural remedies and doing some vitamins and like shifting and having you continue to remove. So what I found was that when I ate sugar, I got the migraine. So what I found was when I completely removed refined sugar out of my diet, I wouldn't get a migraine. It was nuts. And then anytime I got a migraine for like the next 3 years, I would track it to me eating sugar. I was like, oh my goodness. There was one time where I had a migraine for 26 days.
Oh my
26 days. It was in September of 2015. I remember it so clearly. So I did. And I ended up going to Carlos and she said, you know what, we're going to put you on a leave of absence. And I was like, what? A leave of absence? And if you remember, that counselor told me when I was 28 years old, you never learned how to brush your teeth and make your bed and get up and shower on time. And that's exactly what she said. She said, in your story, Brandi, you have so much trauma and you've never actually worked through it. And I'm like, what do you mean trauma? My parents never died in a plane wreck. I was never raped in a dark alley. Like, I don't have trauma. She's like, no, need I remind you? And she started reminding me different things that I had gone through. She's like, don't compare. Trauma is trauma. And you've had some major trauma in your life. And you've jumped into performance mode every single time. And you've been trying to juggle the whole entire alphabet before you even knew how to say ABC. You're like A, F, G, Z, X, Y, Z, A, L. She's like, we're going to get you to ground zero where you know how to do A, B, C. And then we'll look at bringing you back into the workforce. And Marianne, my whole family was so confused. They did not get it. They're like, wait a second, you can go to Narcotics Anonymous meetings, you can go to the gym, you can hang out with your girlfriends, but you're not going to work. Like, what? What do you mean? Why does she have you on a leave of absence? And had this woman not been as such high prestige as she was, until like held at such a high esteem between her colleagues and where she was in her field, and the amount of respect that I had for her, my interactions with her, I probably would have buckled, because my family was seriously so distraught. They like could not understand it, like how irresponsible of me. And Nordstrom had an incredible leave of absence program where they paid me like 40% of what I was initially making to help me get my life on track with mental disability is probably what they called it. But that's what my family said, you're not disabled. You can function in life just fine. And Carlos and Chantel were like, why don't you come out and visit us? We're going to a spiritual retreat on January 1st. We'd love to have you. Just get there. Well, the flights from Denver to California were dirt cheap. And so I booked a ticket. I did New Year's Eve with my family, and I flew out January 1st, 2015 at like 6 a.m. And Carlos and Chantel drove through the night. They were driving in from Texas, and they drove through a hail snowstorm, 24 hours through the night. They drove through to pick me up, to take me to the Sequoia Mountains. They risked their lives for me. They're amazing, incredible people. And we went up to the spiritual retreat. And by now they were married, and their children were like incredible, right? Because I had lived with them for, 3 months, 3 years prior. And their children were like so honoring. And their one son, who never really spoke up a whole lot, offered to pray for everybody. And there was like 50 of us. I was like, what? Oh my gosh, I want this. I want to be around this more. And I remember the woman that hosted the retreat, her name was Tammy Dow. She said, Brandi, what do you use to fight off the enemy? And I was like, a lot of F-bombs. And she's like, well, don't you know the word of God? I'm like, Daniel in the lion's den, like Noah's Ark. She's like, we're going to teach you the word of God and we're going to armor you with truth. And that started my journey, January 1st, 2015, of diving in and reading the word of God, because I grew up in church, yet I grew up Mormon. And so when we talked about reading different books, it was more about reading the Book of Mormon than it was about the Bible. And by the time I was in a Bible study course, that was when my addiction had already fallen into place, and I don't remember any of it. So I started getting in the word, and she would send me different messages and help me to learn. Okay, so Marianne, I need to ask you, like, where do you want me to go with this? Because this is leading into like meeting my husband. Hold on, you're muted.
You can go into meeting your husband. Where do you feel in your heart this should go? Do you want to leave that?
No, this is really, yeah, okay.
People want to know how you met your husband, because
okay,
that in itself is a miracle.
Okay.
Go for it.
All right. And so Tammy started sending me different messages and passages to help me learn and study the word of God. And I remember I came home from that retreat. I stayed with Carlos and Chantel for about a week, and then I flew back to Denver. And my beautiful grandmother could see the light in me. And I know God sent me to Denver to be able to walk with my Nana in that time, because she herself had actually fallen away from God.
Wow.
And so we started to go to church together. And I remember I got home and I got down on my knees in her basement. And I said, Nana, would you pray with me? Because my mom taught me about the power of prayer from such a young age. I mean, I have always believed in prayer. And even my dad, he would tuck me in at night, every single night, tell me, sleep tight. Don't let the bed bugs bite. And remember to say your prayers. And so I asked my Nana, will you kneel and pray with me? And at that spiritual retreat, I had learned about what the tree of life meant. I had learned that the tree of life meant God's love. And I never knew that. I never knew that. I didn't know what I thought the tree of life was. But Tammy had explained it so beautifully that I was like, oh my gosh, so I don't need to chase after men. I don't need to chase after sex. I don't need to chase after the love of man. It's just the love of God that I want, because I knew about the tree of life. We had pictures of the tree of life growing up in our house. So I remember kneeling on my knees in my grandmother's basement saying, you know what, God, I surrender my life to you. I'm 31 years old. I'm single with no kids. No, at the time I'm 32. I'm 32 years old, single with no kids, no prospects, right? Everybody that had been dating me, I would tell them right from the get-go, I'm not having sex with you, just so you know. They're like, okay, cool. And then they would drop me off at my house, or we would be out and about, and they would try to kiss me. And I'm like, excuse me, there's no kissing. Like, I got to the point where it was like, if we kiss, you might as well just take my clothes off, right? As soon as I started kissing, it was like, woo, this got hot and heavy. So I really scaled it all back, Marianne. I was like, there's no kissing. And so I told God, I have no prospects. And so, Father, if you want me to be the Mother Teresa of addicts and never get married and never have children and just be a beacon of hope and truth and light and share my story and help radically set people free, then so be it. I will. And I choose you to be my husband, God. And I remember saying, I'll shave my legs for you, Lord. I'll paint my toenails for you. I'll make breakfast for you, God. And you will be my husband. You will be my husband. Because somebody had told me that however you're living your life now, it's going to be how you're going to live it after you get married or after you have children or after, like, for example, you know, when I get a nicer car, I'll take care of my car, or when I get a nicer home, or when I get married, then I'll take care of myself, or when I have a boyfriend, right? So I had been hearing like, no, Brandi, just because you don't have a nice car now, like, how are you treating your car now? How are you treating your home now? How are you treating your body now? So I told the Lord, you are my husband and I'll shave my legs for you. And I had called my family. I told them I'm done with all the dating apps. I'm done with all of it. I'm just going to focus on me and my health and my career and spending time with my family. And my Nana and I were having a beautiful relationship at that time. We were getting in the word and reading. I'd asked her, I'm like, hey, will you help me learn the word of God? And she's like, sure. So we would sit in her two comfy, cozy chairs together. And we would read, and we did a couple fasts together. She had never fasted and prayed. And we just aligned forces, and it was really powerful. And I stayed in touch with Carlos and Chantel, and my psychiatrist had even said, I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go back to work. She's like, Brandi, it's been a couple weeks. She's like, you're not going back to work yet. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, no, we're going to give this some time. She's like, and you are operating at such a higher frequency. I love this. Whatever you did in California, like, go back and visit them and do it again. She's like, because that was so good for you. I'm like, this is so crazy. Like, what? I'm not supposed to go to work. I'm supposed to go back and visit my friends. How irresponsible was what was like going through my head. And she's like, no, I want you to go back and visit them. And so I called Chantel. We were staying in touch every day, right? Like, Chantel was so amazing about like just checking on my girl, you know, how you doing? And Chantel was totally into essential oils. She was majorly into essential oils. She's like, yeah, girl, I don't even use perfumes anymore. And I'm like, excuse me, you will not get this Nordstrom girl away from perfume. Like, yeah, right. You all natural hippie, tree hugger, whatever, you're weird. And I'm laughing because I'm completely opposite now. Yet back in 2015, that was my mindset. So she stayed in touch with me, and she's like, hey, there's a conference happening at the end of February. Danny Johnson is coming to town. Well, Danny Johnson is a powerful business entrepreneur, life. She teaches first steps to success. And I had gone to a couple of her events in 2011. Well, I hadn't been for almost 4 years. And so I'm like, all right, cool. Yeah. Like, I'd love to go to one of her events. So I fly out to LA, and Chantel picks me up from the airport, and she's like, oh my gosh, guess what? Rogelio's coming to town. Well, when I lived with Carlos and Chantel in 2011, another guy lived in their house as well. His name was Rogelio. He was this Hispanic man that lived in their garage, who was separating from his neighbor, who was their neighbor, who was separating from his kids' mom. And he was super quiet. I remember he had like really cool artwork and like really cool pieces of wood, but he didn't really talk much. and his kids' mom would come and they would have a disagreement and then leave and whatever. But we lived under the same roof. We lived under the same roof for like 2 months and we never talked. I was on my network marketing mission, talking 12 to 14 hours a day on the phone, and he was working and sleeping in the garage. Well, she's like, guess what? Rogelio's coming to town. I'm like, what? I'm like, cool. Okay. Like, that's super quiet, dude. All right. I'm like, well, any friend of yours, any brother of yours is a brother of mine. Because Carlos and Chantel had stayed in really close touch with Rogelio as well. So they were like Rogelio's spiritual brother and sister, and they were like my spiritual brother and sister. And so they even made jokes about it. They're like, the orphans are coming home. The orphans are coming home. Yay. You know, both of us were coming. And Rogelio shows up that weekend. And I remember even thinking like, oh my gosh, he's going to be so annoyed with how much I talk. And he came. And it was, yeah, it was really, oh no, it wasn't uncomfortable at first. Okay, hold on. He's going to be so annoyed with how much I talk. And so I told Carlos and Chantel that weekend, I wanted to surrender it all to the Lord and really allow him to mold me however he wanted. Because Marianne, by now I'm 32 years old. I had done everything that I knew how, right? And I still was not where I wanted to be. And I was still feeling empty. And so I realized that like what I thought was best probably wasn't best. And I can remember going to that conference. Thinking, Heavenly Father, my name is Brandi Diana Kowal. I'm 5 years old. And I want you to mold me however you want and use me however you want. Well, little did I know that Rogelio was going through his own transformation. And maybe one day you'll get the opportunity to hear his side of the story. Yet I found out that he too had said a prayer of like, Lord, I'm done. I'm done chasing the women. I'm done chasing the drugs and alcohol. I just want to chase you. And if one day you can ever bless me with a woman who will love my children like her own, I want to be ready for it. So we became brother and sister that weekend. I ended up having laryngitis, couldn't talk, no joke. It was so funny. We all prayed before the event, and I shared a bit of my story about having the spiritual awakening with Tammy Dow and finding out about the tree of life being the love of God. And Rogelio was like, hey, can I ask you something? And he's like, when I went to my rehab program, and I'm like, what? You went to rehab? He's like, oh yeah, girl, I was a crazy addict. I'm like, really? So we start talking, and come to find out, our stories were so parallel. The only difference was I was a white girl in Anchorage, Alaska, and he was a Hispanic in Los Angeles, California. Otherwise, like the age, time frames, and I'm like, we lived under the same roof and we never knew this about each other. This is crazy. He's like, yeah, did you ever get the letter I wrote you in rehab? I'm like, huh? He's like, yeah, I saw your post on Facebook that you were going to the Salvation Army Rehab Center for 90 days and you wouldn't have access to your phone and you left the address. I sent you a letter. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Like, I don't remember. He's like, it's all right. No big deal. And he's like, can I give you a word? And I'm like, sure. He's like, well, this part of your story reminds me of this in the Bible. And he started sharing me stories of the Bible. I'm like, it sounds like you know the Bible pretty well. And I'm on a mission right now to learn the word of God. Would you be willing to help me learn it? He's like, sure, I'd love to. He's like, I have a Bible in my car. I have one in my bathroom. I have one like in a couple different areas of my home. I'd love to. So Carlos, Chantel, and Rogelio and I created our little family brother and sister text thread. And for the next 6 weeks, we all went our separate ways. Rogelio went back home. I went up to Alaska to visit my family, and then back to Denver. And Carlos and Chantel were a couple hours north of where Rogelio lived, but we had our little family text. And Rogelio and I started talking on the phone every day. I was helping him with marketing and advertising ideas for his landscape company. I remember asking him, so what's your next step when you go home from the event? He's like, I'm going to work harder and I'm going to make more money. I'm like, did you not just listen to anything that just was said? It's not about working harder. It's about working smarter. He's like, oh, well, can you help me with that? So we would talk on the phone, no joke, for hours. I would brainstorm marketing ideas with him. And then he's like, okay, let's open the Bible. And we would read, and then he would share with me like what it meant. And after about a month or so, and I even remember my mom telling me, Brandi, you better be careful. You know, he might start falling for you. And I'm like, no. He has tattoos all over his body. And he has 4 children, 2 baby mamas. No. Well, we talked and we talked and we talked and we connected. And for the first time, Marianne, I felt safe. I felt safe. And I found myself like falling for him. And I had even wondered, like, why is he not interested in me? I would even ask him, like, what do you want in life? Like, what do you see later on in life? Like, what do you want in a wife? And what do you see? And he would just say, God first, God first, God first. When I put God first in all I do, everything else will fall into place. So when I went back to Denver, my psychiatrist had recommended a inpatient mental therapy program. And I remember telling her, no, I've already been to rehab twice. I am not doing a 3rd inpatient rehab center. Like, draw the line. She's like, well, will you at least go to the outpatient? It's called outpatient. Will you at least go to outpatient? I'm like, sure. She's like, I highly recommend it. I think it'll be really good for you. Doesn't have anything to do with drugs and alcohol. I'm like, okay. So I go, and it was one of the most powerful programs, Marianne, because it dealt with your thoughts. And I was in there with like doctors and lawyers and CEOs and nurses and even counselors. Like, I was in there with some pretty awesome people. And it was a 2-week like mental behavior health type program. Well, I mean, actually it was a mental hospital. I remember after being there a couple of days, some of the doors, I realized, I'm like, every time I close a door, it locks. What? And then I'm like, am I in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? Oh my gosh, I'm in like a psychiatric hospital. And I remember I went to Beth. I was like, girl, you're good. You are good. Because if you would have told me you were putting me in a psychiatric mental hospital, I would have been like, hell no, I'm going there. Yet this place was amazing because it taught us how to have boundaries. It taught us how to have like healthy boundaries. It taught us how to say no. I'm like, wait, what? It's okay to say no? No, that's unheard of. Because like my whole life, I was just programmed like, you just say yes, you just say yes. It's an open door. Like there's no boundaries. It's everybody knows everything. And just, I didn't know. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And it was like 45 minutes from my house. And so every morning I would call Rogelio and we would talk driving there. And then every time after I would call him and I'm like, oh my gosh, guess what? I learned this and this and this today. And we were like digging in the Bible together and it was so cool. And so I extended my program. I was like, this is the first time I really feel clarity. This is the first time I feel like I've been typing and it's actually downloading. Can I stay for 2 more weeks? And I even stayed and did 2 more weeks. And they said, yes. So when I graduated, Rogelio was like, well, why don't you come to California? Like I have an extra car. I have an extra room, like no strings attached. Come out. I'll show you some of the projects we've been working on. And you can just have like some alone time by the beach to really just reflect on all the things that have been going on with you. I'm like, that sounds amazing. And so I did. And I flew in on a Wednesday. And by Saturday, the Lord had told me that I wasn't conflicted about California, because Carlos and Chantel were like, you just need to move here. And I'm like, I just moved to Denver 7 months ago. Like, I can't keep moving, right? And they're like, come on, just move here. So I remember it was a Saturday afternoon. We had just all gone to the beach. And in the shower, the Lord was like, you're not conflicted about California. You're conflicted about Rogelio, because that is the man you are to marry. And I remember being like, oh my gosh. And so I was like, hey, can I talk to you? And I sat him down. I was like, I just want to let you know that like this, like brother, sisterly love that we have is like turned into more for me. And I understand I live in Denver and you live here, and, you know, you have your business and you have your children, but like, just so you know, like, I'm not looking to date anybody else. And for lack of a better phrase, like, I'd be willing to make it work because I've fallen in love with you. And he was like, okay. And like, gave me like the good game pat. We like hugged it out and it was like, pat, pat, good game. I was like, what is going on, Lord? Like, are you kidding me? Okay, you really do want me to be the Mother Teresa of addicts. All right, okay. And we all went out that night. And the next day we took the kids to the beach and allowed Carlos and Chantel to sleep. And Rogelio and I are talking. And all of a sudden he goes, will you go out on a date with me? And I'm like, what? And he's like, why are you laughing? I'm like, oh my gosh, why am I laughing? Because I'm nervous. Let's see, you laugh when you're nervous. I'm nervous. Yeah, I'm nervous. I'm like, I didn't know what you're asking me on a date. I'm like, we've been talking for like 6 weeks. You haven't shown any interest in me. He's like, are you kidding me? I sent you pictures of the Christian booklet of how to date your friend in 4 dates. I'm like, I didn't know that was for me. He's like, yes. When you didn't respond, I didn't sleep all night. I told Chantel I screwed everything up. And I'm like, you screwed everything up. There was nothing to screw up. You never told me you liked me. He's like, are you kidding me? I never thought I could have a woman like you. I've fallen in love with you from the day I met you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. And so we go back to the house. We tell Carlos and Chantel that we have found, like, we share all the stories, right? We decide it wouldn't be best for me to go, 2 hours south with Rogelio and be alone in his home with them with this newfound information and awareness. And that night, Rogelio left and Carlos and Chantel sat me down and they took me on a 5-hour journey of what it would look and feel like to really believe I was worthy to be married, to really believe and know what it is like to have a covenant marriage with God and your husband and you, a 3-string, I don't know the exact phrase, but 3-string between God, your husband, and you, and not worry about what anybody else thinks. Because I'm like, oh my gosh, he has 2 baby mamas. Oh my gosh, he has tattoos all over his body. Oh my gosh, he's Hispanic. Oh my gosh, that, right? Like all these things, judgments that really had been stripped away from me from my rehab center because I had fallen in love with all of those people. I say all of those people. I had fallen in love with all of God's children. It didn't matter what they looked like or what was on their body or what they had gone through. He really showed me it's about their heart and their character. But I was so afraid. I mean, for years, Marianne, it was like, I'll do anything. Just don't ask me to go against what my family would say. And I knew that my family at that time, without knowing Rogelio, wouldn't agree. And Carlos and Chantel are so wise and such incredibly patient teachers that they peeled back all those outside materialistic things and said, think about Rogelio's heart and line that up with your mom's heart and tell me what their conversation would look like. Think about Rogelio's heart and your dad's heart and line those two up together and tell me what that conversation would look like. And they did this with my brothers, with my nieces, with some of my friends. And they took me on a 5-hour journey of visioning my life out. And by the time I was done, it was 2 a.m. I was skipping around the house, pronouncing myself the Mrs. Brandi Del Rio. And Rogelio had no idea, right? So I call him Monday. We had a beautiful conversation. I didn't tell him that I thought I was Mrs. Brandi Del Rio, but I did ask him, I'm like, what are your intentions in asking me on a date? Because I heard that when you're asking somebody on a date, you're pursuing them for marriage. Are you pursuing me for marriage? He's like, well, yeah, if you put it that way, I guess I am. And Tuesday, I woke up with this crazy gut feeling of like, I've got to see him. I don't know what's going to happen. It was so real that I was afraid he was going to like get in a car accident or something. I'm like, I have got to see him. So I called him and he said, actually, my client just canceled. I can drive up and see you. And so next thing you knew, I was a girl from Alaska having my first date in Huntington Beach, California. We were going to the beach and I had my bathing suit on and my outfit and like a lunch packed and was so excited, prancing around the house, declaring myself as Mrs. Del Rio. And Chantel had had a conversation with Rogelio when he got there. And I was all like thinking that he was going to ask me to marry him. And we go to the beach and we're on, our day date. And just, I remember thinking like, this is so surreal. This is so cool. And we get to the end of it and he never asked me. And I'm like, what is going on? Because I knew that Chantel had given him a ring. I'm totally giving you like way details. Chantel had given him a ring that only fit my wedding finger, but he didn't know that I knew she gave it to him and he was too nervous to ask me. So he takes me to Home Depot, parks me in front of Home Depot, which is like a home improvement store. And he's like, so I love to come to Home Depot. And I'm like, why are we here? And he's like, whenever I find myself feeling lost, I go walk the aisles and I just smell the wood. He's like, I just take deep breaths of the wood. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And so then he goes, I have something for you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, here it is. And he's like, I have this friendship ring, Brandi. And I'm like, a friendship ring? Are you kidding me? Expectations, right? So he proceeds to tell me that, he has things that he needs to take care of first. He needs to lose weight and get his life in order and yada, yada. We go home. Carlos and Chantel are all so excited. Did you ask her? Did you ask her? And he's like, no. I storm in the back room. Well, we end up talking and he ends up telling me the reason that he gave me that ring is because he does believe that when we put God's love first, everything else will fall into place. And that's what the tree of life means, is God's love. And he wants that to be a representation of our future. And that he did have plans of marrying me. He's like, I do want to marry you, Brandi. I just have some things that I want to get in order first. And that melted everything. Because for years, Marianne, I was good enough for people to sleep with, but I wasn't good enough for somebody to marry. And so as soon as he said those words of like, I do want to marry you, because I knew that I knew that I knew what the Lord had told me that day in the shower. I was like, take as long as you want, take a year, it's all good, we're good. Somebody wants to marry me. And we go have dinner that night. We went and had pho, noodle soup, and he walks in and I'm ordering food for us. And he's like, hey, Brandi. I'm like, yeah. He's like, will you marry me? I'm like, what? Here? Now? What? This is like your big idea, your big plan? He's like, well, will you? And I was like, yes. So that was April 28th, 2015. We went to bed that night saying, okay, well, I want you to pray about when do you think we should get married? And he's like, okay, and you pray about it too. And we knew that we weren't going to kiss. We were going to save our marriage for purity. We knew that we had enough dirtiness in our life from before that we didn't want to bring any of that into this marriage, and that we were made new and renewed as pure, innocent children of God, and that we wanted to bring that purity into our marriage, into our covenant. And so we chose not to even kiss. And we woke up the next morning and I'm like, what did you hear? He's like, what did you hear? I'm like, no, you tell me first. He's like, I heard today. I'm like, I heard today too. I'm like, this is crazy. And so on April 29th, I called my family, scared out of my bejeebers, to let them know not only was I engaged, but that I was getting married that day. I'm the only girl and I'm the youngest of my family, and nobody had met him. Nobody even knew his name. And now I'm choosing to get married. That was some crazy conversations. Yet I knew that for the first time in my life, I needed to do something for me that I heard directly from the Lord. I'm really passionate about, if I was to close my eyes or if I was to die tomorrow and meet my Creator, meet my Heavenly Father, would I be able to look him in the eye and say, I didn't know I was supposed to marry Rogelio? And it was a no, because I knew I heard him so clear, and I know and believe that God knows our hearts better than we do. And I couldn't lie. And so I was able to stand on that conviction when I picked up that phone call and made 4 different phone calls, 5 different phone calls to each family member. And my identity had been so lost in perfectionism and comparison that I chose to get married on a beach with no makeup on, barefoot. So professional makeup artist on April 29th, 2015, I chose to get married with no makeup on because I was done hiding. And that was one of the best days of my life. Yet I can tell you that that when I syndrome hadn't gone away yet. I thought when I get married, everything else would just be bliss. And that was almost 7 years ago now. And that's been quite the journey that we can save for another time. But I'm so grateful that my husband chose to come alongside me and tell me that I don't need all those medications. When Rogelio met me, I had a handful of prescription, at least 10. I had at least 10 medications that I had to take every single day, including giving myself those shots. And I wore a blindfold to go to bed, and I wore Bose headphones, silencing headphones with like tranquil music, because my anxiety was just so rampant. And I can remember driving with Chantel and her and I talking about this, because I wanted to be able to have babies, but the doctors had told me that I couldn't go off of my medications. And I remember Chantel slamming on the brakes, and she said, Brandi, if you keep putting God in a box, he's going to have to stay in a box. I don't give a flying flip what those doctor printouts said. You are made new and renewed in him, and you are made fully complete, and your mind is healed, and you are a sound mind. And she just started speaking truth over me. She's like, but if you continue to speak those results over yourself and you continue to put God in a box, then yeah, he'll stay there and you will stay there. But it's not until you completely remove all those dang labels. And it was like a slap in the face, man. She literally like punched me in the gut. However, it was exactly what I needed. And Rogelio even told me, we can walk this out together. I remember him telling me, you know how gifted I am with my hands? I'll make you your own essential oils. And so my health journey started with essential oils. And I went cold turkey on all of my medications except for one. I didn't tell anybody in my family, nobody. Only 4 people knew, Rogelio, Carlos, and Chantel, because I didn't want anybody planting any kind of seeds of doubt or anything. It was me and God and my husband on this journey together. And slowly but surely, God started bringing people into my life and education and awareness. And I got married in April of 2015, and I was introduced to your book in August of 2017. And I'm so incredibly grateful because reading your book and being able to learn from you, Marianne, has been like the missing pieces of the puzzle. It's almost like if you envision a puzzle and you have a jigsaw puzzle and you have enough pieces to be able to see what the picture is and see how beautiful it is, but there's still a handful of missing pieces. It's like, yeah, but okay, where do these ones line up? And when I read your book and started learning and growing and implementing what you teach, all of those missing pieces of the puzzle got put there. And for 4 years now, I have been completely set free from any medications. Actually, from medications, I have been completely set free for 6 years. However, the the double-mindedness, the crazy spirals where I felt like I was white knuckling it, that has been free for about 3.5 years now, since coming across your book and your teachings and implementing it. Because I started following the natural way. I love what you say about if you want a godlike body, you eat a godlike way. Duh. It doesn't get any more simpler than that.
Yep. Absolutely.
So God blessed me with my first baby in March 18th, 2018.
Wow.
And I can stand here today and say I had an absolutely prescription-free pregnancy, sound mind. And what was so cool is about a year after I was off all of my medications, my mom had double knee replacement. She had both of her knees replaced at the same time. No. She had her hip replaced. Sorry. She had double knee replacement while I was living in Alaska, in 2013 or something, before I was married. And I was her nurse, and I had her on a regimen, and I had a schedule, and I helped her get through pain-free. Honestly, it was amazing. So when she had to have her hips replaced, my dad said, what does it take? What do we got to pay for Brandi to come up here? Because I need Brandi to do what she did before. So my husband blessed me with going up to Alaska for 3 weeks to be able to be with my mom. And my dad slept downstairs. And so I slept next to my mom for 3 weeks. And after the fact, I got to let her know, by the way, Mom, I have been off of all of my prescriptions for a year now.
Wow.
She was like, what? She's like, why didn't you tell me? I'm like, because you would have told me I was crazy and you would have worried sick because I went cold turkey and you're not supposed to, right? I'm like, well, hello, you just spent 21 nights next to me in a row. She's like, yeah, this is amazing.
Yep.
So that was so cool. So yeah, by the time I got pregnant and had my baby, it was 100% prescription free. I've been able to be a sound-minded woman. Yeah, I still have my crazy times. I mean, we all do. I actually like being a little bit crazy. I don't want to be super refined. I love getting polished, right? I want to be polished, but I enjoy living a little bit of the crazy blessed life, right?
I think it's not craziness. I think it's passion. I think it's a passion.
Yes.
For making the world a better place. We've got this deep desire to take what we've learned and what has worked for us, and we've seen work for other people, and just go out there and kind of preach the good news. You can all be well, you can be healthy, you can be this.
Yes.
And it's sometimes
Yes.
people look at you like you're crazy, but the reality of it is they're crazy for not actually just realizing that the human body is capable of repairing itself if you give it time and you create the right environment. And that's what you did. You created
Like if you want a godlike body, you eat a godlike way, and then the body is made to repair itself. Those statements right there, the body is made to repair itself. So for me, it was like, okay, if the body's made to repair itself, then what can I fuel it with that's going to best enhance it to repair itself? And so even less than a year later, I remember Xander was 11 months old. Yes, 11 months old. I find out I'm pregnant again. And I had just told my husband, you know what, Xander's about to be a year old. You know, I was at the time, we were getting 4 of my bonus children every other week, right? And I was the youngest. I didn't have any siblings. I became a mom like overnight. And Rogelio's prayer was answered because I do love those children like they're my own. And I give them everything I have anytime they're in my presence. So I said, you know what, let's just focus on like the children we have now. And then a week later, I found out I was pregnant. And then not only did I find out I was pregnant, I found out like 6 weeks later, I was pregnant with twins.
Wow.
Yes. Pregnant with twins. So at 32, I was surrendering my life to the Lord, saying, God, if you want me to be the Mother Teresa of addicts, because I was single with no kids and no prospects, I was now about to be 37 with 3 children and married, actually 8 total, 8 children and married. And he redeems. And it's been incredible because I have utilized the natural way with my children as well. And so Alexander, who's about to turn 4, and my twins, who are a little over 2, have never been to the doctor. They have never been to the doctor because
that's proof of the fact that what you're doing is right, because we haven't been to the doctor for over 30 years, and people can be critical because you're eating natural foods. You're not doing anything crazy, you're just eating God-made foods. And they're like, because they've got hang-ups and issues with food themselves, they kind of try and put that stuff on you. And they'll stand there, they're on like 10 different kinds of meds. They're going off to the doctor for another test. They are tired, they are overweight, they've got brain fog, and they're telling you that this is too radical or extreme.
Right, yeah. Well, then one of my twins, Marianne, was born with tetralogy of Fallot. It was a heart condition. Yeah. And so he had to have open heart surgery. I know that you know this because you helped me walk through it. And because of what you shared with me and how to prepare his body, when the doctor said he was going to be staying in the hospital for 7 nights, he stayed in the hospital Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, 3 nights. He was in the hospital for 3 nights. They were amazed. He had surgery a week after his 2-year-old birthday, and he had open heart surgery on Thursday. By Friday, he was already up moving around. By Saturday, he was already walking around the whole entire floor. And by Sunday, he was like pushing the nurses in this little like trolley thing. They were amazed. Wow. And he has been strong, valiant, vigorous warrior ever since. And it's so cool. I get so fired up about it. So passionate. I'm very passionate because I had some things, Marianne, happen in my life. I made some choices in faith that took me out on a faith journey that was a little bit more intense than I bargained for. Yep. Which led me to make some decisions where I chose to eat some foods that don't serve my body very well. And I say it like that because we all have a choice, right? We all have a choice on like what we choose to put in our body. And it was my teenager's birthday and he wanted to have like brownies and ice cream and go to a steakhouse. And I have been really clean about my eating for probably about 3 years now, 3.5 years now, because Linda was so powerful. She was in my home and she knew that I wanted to be a healthy mom and healthy, fit, strong woman. Yet she was taking the items that were on my shelf and she's like, Brandi, what is this doing here? I'm like, what do you mean? It says organic, all natural made. She's like, turn it around and read the ingredients and read like how much sugar is added. I'm like, huh? What? You read ingredients? Added sugar? I didn't know. She's like, you are the classic marketer that they are marketing to. All they got to put is like all natural or organically made, right? And man, that has me on another fired up passion mission, Marianne, because now with my children, I'm reading all of these awesome labels that had I not been empowered to read ingredients and like added sugars, I would be buying them because the marketing is so awesome on how healthy they are. Yeah. And then I turn it around and there's like 20 grams of sugar per serving. Yeah. And then you Google how much sugar should a 2-year-old have? And if you even Google how much sugar a 2-year-old should have, it says, even from the American, whatever, health, whatever, children under 2 should consume 0 added sugar. Wow. It even says it online. Yep. 0 added sugar if you're under 2. And then 2, I want to say it was like 2 to 9 years old. They recommend like 19 grams of added sugar. I'm like, my gosh, you can get 19 grams in a sip of a Capri Sun or a fruit roll up.
And that's really to appease the businesses and the companies that are making things that you you can allow it after the age of 2, and people don't look at the 19 grams. They're just like, well, it's okay to give it somebody over 2 with added sugar.
Right.
It's what we call junk food sold as health food, and it's actually criminal. It really is criminal because you're misleading people, and most people are not that into nutrition that they're going to read the labels. They're exactly what you say: organic, natural, good. This is great. Let me get it. Mm-hmm. Really sad, but we've all got that choice, as you said. We can actually read the labels. We can make better choices. And the thing is that, people often ask me why I have my cello standing next to me here, because it takes a lot of time and effort to learn how to play any musical instrument. And you don't get healthy overnight. You just don't. It's a slow process, just like you getting sober and getting healthy was the slow step-by-step process. And you get to the place where you're living in the sweet spot, which is like learning. You've now learned to play your instrument, and you can play it, as a concert cellist or a pianist or a guitarist, and you're in a band. Because you're making sweet music, you're living in that sweet spot where everything's working properly and you're sleeping properly at night and your bowels are working properly and your brain is great. And yes, you can be passionate, but you're not crazy passionate. You go to bed at night and you sleep. It's the most amazing thing. And your story is so profound. Honestly, it is so profound. I'd like
what your teachings teach is very like practical. It's like, it's not even, yes, it's about what you're choosing to put in your body, yet you also educate on like fresh air and oxygen. At one point during my journey, I was doing the hyperbaric chamber. I would go and sit in like 90-minute sessions for the hyperbaric chamber, right? Because oxygen helps heal the body. Everybody knows that. And then even like alkalining your body. Cancer cannot live in an alkaline body. So there are people that I get fairly passionate with of like, why do you want to wait to get cancer before you alkaline your body? Doesn't it make sense to alkaline your body now? Right. And I love how you say it's not about eliminating, it's about adding and shifting, right? I used to have crazy gas because I would eat animal protein and then eat my salad afterwards because I wanted to eat my hot food while it's hot. So I would eat that first and then my salad. which then now I know my salad's trying to get out of me, and the animal protein's like, hey, I'm going to hang out here and like, you know, catch some rays, which gave me like horrific gas. Anybody who knows me, if you were to ever ask, like, what's a memory about Brandi, they would probably talk about how stinky my farts are. And now I eat my salad first. And if I choose to have chicken or egg or something, I don't have crazy horrific gas, like, or I have my fruit first. It's so, oh my gosh, it's so cool. And then even my children love eating apples. Yeah. They go into the fridge. My 2-year-olds go into the fridge and they bring an apple to everybody. And like grapes. And I'm very firm with like, no, you know, we do our own popsicles, right, in your different recipes. And it's so cool. And then when you think about it, like even we're in landscape, my husband and I have a landscaping business, and I ask him about plants all the time, right? I even asked him one time, can you take me through the process of like, once you plant a seed, then what happens? Like, how do you get the seed to take root? He's like, well, actually, if you just put the seed in its natural environment and it's in really good, rich soil, you don't really need to do anything with it. It'll just take its course because that's what it's created to do.
Yep. And
I was like, oh my gosh, that's just like us. That's just like our bodies. That's just like our environment. If we're put in our natural environment and we're in good, rich soil, then we are going to naturally do what God created us to do.
Yep. And what you've got to do is make sure you pull out the weeds by the root, because if you don't pull it out by the root, it grows back bigger and stronger. And that's like bad habits. If you don't pull out the bad habits and the issues that you have in your life, like you work through those things, you pulled them out, those weeds can grow and eventually strangle the healthy plants because they're not being pulled out. I learned so much in the garden. It's amazing. It's just amazing. Every time
that was one of my, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just, you're just learning so much about life with plants. If you don't feed them properly, they die. If you don't give them enough water, they die. If they don't get enough sunlight, they die. We as humans need sunlight, fresh air. We need nutrients, we need water, and we need exercise, which is essential. Plants don't get exercise, but they get blown by the wind, which actually makes trees, for example, a lot stronger. When the wind blows them, their roots go down deeper and they get stronger. So even stuff like that, we're like trees. When the wind blows and the storms come, our roots become stronger. We become stronger as people. And people often say, why must good people go through bad things? To make you stronger. That's what you need. You need to be stronger so that you can go out there and be a mother of 8 kids and the mother of Teresa to the addict. You know, it's just that strength, that inner strength, and with it comes this incredible, like a tree. If you look at it, it's planted, it's firm, but it's content. Trees are content. They're solid and they just stay there and they give shade to everybody. And that's what our lives are like. We bring calmness, we bring shade, we bring, just by following what our maker told us to do, which is so simple. It's exactly it. Put God-made foods in a God-made body and you'll get God-made health. Put man-made foods in a God-made body, you get man-made diseases. It's that simple. Whether it's man-made drugs, man-made alcohol, all of that stuff causes problems. And it's so simple.
Well, and I forgot to share with you that one of my diagnoses was PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder. Okay. And by the time I was like 13, I think I started my period at 13. I can remember, and that's why we were so excited for the hormone doctor, right? Because by the time I got the appointment for the hormone doctor at 29, it had been 16 years. For 16 years, I had lived half of my life wanting to be the next president of the United States, and then the other half of my life wanting to die. Yeah. Like, no joke. It was night and day. It was like, and it was for 2 weeks, like every 2 weeks. And we tracked it. It was like clockwork. Every 2 weeks, we would just take a dive. And then as soon as my period started, right? Well, I have been very passionate and convicted with perfect health and whole world health and what you've been sharing and how to eat with that and what the results have been with our family for the last 4 years. However, my conviction level went even deeper this last December because I chose to start eating completely opposite, right? I wasn't getting migraines from sugar anymore. And so I started having some ice cream, started having some brownies, started having some steak, started kind of just being like, yeah, I wasn't getting outside and being active. I had found myself kind of slipping, so to speak. And I had the most horrific period of my life that month of December. Like crazy schizophrenic, thought I was going nuts. My husband looked at me and said, I have never seen you like this, ever. And it's because I had been choosing to eat at least no sugar and gluten prior to marrying him. And I got on my knees with the Lord and was like, God, what is going on? And he reminded me, this is what your life was like for over 20 years. And I can remember sharing this with somebody and they're like, oh my gosh, you need to go get on some medication. I'm like, no, I don't. I'm like, I haven't had a period like this for 6 years.
Wow.
Like I've had one. If anything, all this did was just show me how much food really does play a part in our life. And not even just our physical appearance, but our brain, our vitality, our emotional, our mental, our spiritual. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I shifted out of it and I've had my period in January and February. And it's like, oh, my period's here. Okay, cool. Yeah, whatever. Keep going.
Amazing.
My cycle has come and gone and not even fazed me at all.
Yeah.
And
you spoke about food affecting us mentally. You know, very often when you're going through things like difficult times in your life, people say, just change your attitude. You know, life is attitude. Have an attitude of gratitude. It's very hard to do that when your brain is being, you have very often people have what we call a chemically sensitive brain or brain allergies. You just have this response to a particular food. And there's a whole lot of reasons for it. And I'm not going to get into it tonight. I don't want to detract from your story. But when you have a brain like that, it like trips out, and people don't really get it. They think like, gosh, you have to really walk the straight and narrow, like you can't deviate at all. But you've got to listen to your body, you've got to listen to your spirit, you've got to listen to your maker, you've got to find your path. And for me, I was a sugar addict. My father was an alcoholic, and I was bipolar for years, and they wanted to put me on all the drugs. And you know my story. You take the refined sugar out and don't touch alcohol, and your brain's normal and it's focused, but it's still passionate and it can still inspire. And that's the thing about it, is when you eat properly, your attitude changes without you even trying to change it. You just become grateful and you become happy and content, and you're not always looking for something more. You're just happy to be, and you're happy to, be there for somebody or not be there, or be with your kids or not be. It's just it's a wonderful, calm, content. So it's an amazing place to be. I call it the sweet spot, because it doesn't matter what happens. You've got a foundation that's so solid. We had the building, burn down, and partners do weird things, and we had lockdown, and all of the stuff affects your businesses. But when you've got your spiritual life, your exercise, your diet in place, those 3 pillars, you build on that. And all of those things affect your attitude, they affect your mental state, they affect your depression, they affect your sleep, your bowels, everything. So it's just like, it seems so simple, but it is, because the truth is always simple. God would never make the truth complicated so it only be available to an elite few. The truth is so simple, and an uneducated person, a child, can understand it. And that's what it should be. God made foods, God made body, you get God made health. Kids get that. God loves you. They get it. It's like basic, simple stuff. We make it so complicated, and we make it so expensive, and it needn't be. So I really, really loved what you've shared tonight. And I know that you've worked on a program that you've put together with some people, and I'd love you not maybe to share, maybe just give us like a 2-minute little rundown, and then just if they can go to it, and we'll put it on the end of the video as well, so that they can click on it and get the link and go to your YouTube channel as well. Yeah.
Well, so for 21 years, I had been chasing, find somebody who has what you want, do what they do, and you'll get what they got. And it was like, what do I got to do? 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 And finally, in October of 2020, I came across a woman who shared with me that God didn't create us to do, God created us to be. It's not about doing, it's about being and becoming who God created you to be, whole and complete, right out the gate, right? And I started working with her on a weekly basis because I found that even after I was married, living in California, 8 children, right? 3 from my belly, I still felt so super empty. And I didn't fully understand why. And it was because I was so consumed with that perfectionism, comparing myself to everybody else, needing things to be perfect, and realizing that there wasn't anything that I could do to really have that inner complete happiness. And so slowly but surely, like one layer at a time, like you talked about, really getting to the weeds and pulling them from the root. And what I had realized was that even in all of my years of personal development and self-development and like trying to control my life, right? I had never actually really gotten to the root of what was going on with me. And so I started this journey of really getting to the root and came across a handful of women in my life that I had known heart to heart, belly to belly, shoulder to shoulder, behind closed doors, that were actually walking out what they were speaking about. Because in my journey, I've been around a lot of people who spoke a lot of great things that once they got off stage, that's not how they lived their life. And so God gave me a vision this last year of, you know, you've been really blessed to be influenced by some really powerful women. And when you share your story, people are going to want to be able to step out in faith like you have. Yet I'm only one person. And to be quite honest with you, Marianne, I have not arrived. I'm still on my journey. And I want to bring people with me. I would rather walk alongside a woman than have somebody looking at my back. I don't want anybody looking at my back. I want people to be looking to my left and to my right and ahead of me, and bringing as many people with me as possible. And so God gave me a vision of bringing together a group of powerful women who believe there is no competition in the kingdom, who are walking with Jesus, who believe that we are made whole and complete just as we are, and that there's nothing that we have to do in order to become, that we already are who he created us to be. And I put together a course for the one who believes, because it's all about what you believe. See, for years, I believed something was wrong with me. For years, I believed that I couldn't hit the mark. For years, I believed that I had to have control of everything. For years, I was thinking that I had to be perfect before I could step out and show up. And I now know that those are all lies. And I have a handful of women who have helped me walk that out, because I do believe that we are not meant to do life alone. I do believe that not one person has all the answers. I do believe that Jesus has all the answers and that Jesus works through people. And so I'm stepping out on faith and I'm following the vision that God gave me, just like he told me to marry Rogelio. And I called some of the women who have impacted my life and helped me create tremendous results in my life in a short amount of time, and asked them if they would all come together for the woman who believes that her life is meant for more, that she is meant for greatness. She just doesn't know how to get there or what that looks like, or even if it's really possible for her. And I want you to know that it is possible, because God shows no favoritism to any man. And if it's possible for one, it's possible for another one. And so I'm telling you right now, I'm living proof that it is possible. And so for the one who believes is for that woman who believes that she is meant for more. And it's a group of powerful women who are bringing you their best nuggets. To be completely transparent, I have spent over $100,000 working with these women. And I'm on a mission to lock arms with Marianne to help impact people. And so it's literally like pennies compared to what I have paid for it. Because it's not about the money, it's about lives being transformed. It's about knowing that if I can meet one woman at a time, one heart at a time, that you will turn around and be able to impact your family, be able to impact your community, and most of all, just even yourself, because you are who matters most.